Steven Rummelsburg, how are you?
I'm great, Matt, Fradd. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, good to have you on the show. This is the third time?
Second time live.
Live, yeah.
Yeah,
This
but we
is
did
good.
a few
You were
Skype.
back on the Matt Fradd show back in those days.
That's right. Way back in the day. 3 years ago almost, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
That's
So
crazy.
I'm really happy to be back.
You know what's crazy is Pints with Aquinas started before Trump was president or even
Right.
ran for office.
That's right.
Was there ever such a time? I can't imagine
remember.
that. Yeah.
The world's gone crazy.
It has. How was your flight yesterday, American Airlines? Did you get stuck at home or did you get stuck
Yeah.
at the airport?
Well, we got stuck at home and at the airport.
Ugh.
So we got delayed 6 a.m. to 11. We showed up. Then it was 4 o'clock.
I
Then
am so sorry.
We were just going to cancel, and they said, "Okay, we'll make it 2 o'clock to make us go." So we ended up going. Yeah, we were stoked actually.
Oh, so if you had have cancelled, they would have lost the money? Because they would have refunded you.
No, we would have lost the money. I'm sure they would not have refunded us.
But so why were they incentivized to change? Say we'll get you on it too.
I don't know. I'm just happy they did. Though.
Yeah, me too.
I honestly didn't know if we would make it from Phoenix. We went from Sacramento to Phoenix. I wasn't even counting on going from Phoenix to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if that was going to happen, but it did.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It's a long flight from California. How do you do with those masks in the plane? I find them
yeah.
very difficult.
Very uncomfortable.
I just flew to North Dakota, a couple of legs, but
Right.
the thing is, the one thing I like about airplanes is reading.
Okay.
And I can't read with a mask on because it fogs my glasses up.
Exactly
Am
right.
I wearing them wrong? Is that the problem?
No, that's intended.
Oh, so we can't read
They
anymore?
want you to not read.
Yes, I knew it.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. What about you? Does that happen to you?
Oh yeah, all the time. So I have to pull the mask down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just long enough not to be chided.
Just low enough to read and then not be chided.
Yeah.
Or asked.
It's almost like they're trying to make the flying experience more and more insufferable.
Yes.
It began with the, I wasn't here, of course, for September 11 and all that ensued after that
Right,
at the
that's
airports.
right.
But going through security is an anxious,
Oh yeah.
anxiety-inducing experience.
Yeah.
And now you got to wear a mask.
Right.
And I've been told that there was a time that flying was like a lovely thing and you were treated
they had
well.
meals and they were
yeah.
polite. Yeah, it was really good. No, it's going to get worse.
Yeah. What's the next thing for flight travel?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I know it's something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting to the point where I'm just trying not to travel.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
I'm thinking we're going to be driving a lot
Yeah.
all over the country
Yeah.
very soon.
What's the longest you would drive? Because you come from California.
Yes.
Driving here would have been ridiculous.
Driving here would have been too much.
Unless you had like a
for
couple
one
of
day.
weeks off.
Yeah. Just make a vacation out of it. I drive a good ways. We've done a lot of driving actually. We've driven to through Wyoming up to Kansas, out through Texas and back. We do love to drive. So we're willing to drive quite a bit. And I think we're willing to drive more. So
Wyoming. There's something magical about
there's
that
something
name.
magical.
I've never been to Wyoming or Montana. Isn't that funny?
my goodness.
But I'd like to go to both.
Oh,
soon.
it's magical in Wyoming.
Yeah.
Especially Wyoming Catholic College.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you have any kids at college yet?
Yeah, we have one daughter who graduated from Belmont Abbey.
Okay.
And then another daughter who went to Benedictine, my daughter Kaya. She
in
went to Benedictine
Kansas.
for 2 years. In Kansas.
Yeah.
She went there 2 years and then came home with the COVID fiasco
Hmm.
and is now doing a phlebotomy course. So she's living with us.
What is that?
Thank goodness. It's drawing blood.
Oh.
She wants to be a medical assistant and draw
Okay,
blood, and
yeah.
she loves needles and arms. She just loves that kind of, yes.
I've always been into needles and arms. What could I do with my life?
My Kaya, she just loves that. And then I mentioned my oldest, Kenya, who is the mother of our granddaughter. Kenya and Brandon live out in Texas.
I can't believe y'all are grandparents.
Yeah, we're grandparents. And our
Yeah.
beautiful little granddaughter.
Faith, you look great.
Yeah.
Grandma? Are you kidding? Do you go by, is it grandma or what do you? Nonna, that's nice.
It's Nona and Nono.
No.
It was just
And where
very
did that
appropriate.
come from?
That's Italian.
Okay. Are you Italian?
Yes.
Rummelsburg?
Well, actually, I was adopted. So,
Okay.
yes, I am Italian.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. From Italy, from Sicily.
You were adopted
Sicilian.
from Sicily?
No, my family comes from Sicily.
Okay.
The land of the Cyclops.
Did you ever meet your birth parents?
I did.
Wow.
I met both sides.
What was that like, and do you even want to go there right now? We don't have to.
Well, it's I wasn't expecting to go there, but yeah, it was treacherous.
How old were you?
I didn't meet them till I was in my 30s. I met my bio mom side of the family, and then I met my bio dad side of the family, and it was everything it was supposed to be,
Good?
but it was treacherous. Oh no, it was horrendous.
How so?
It's just shocking, kids that are adopted, you have a
Yeah.
lot of expectations and maybe fantasies, and then
Yeah.
when you meet the real deal.
And you're probably telling yourself not to get your hopes up and not to...
No,
No?
you're not. And I wasn't.
Really?
I was telling myself to get my hopes way up, and But that was
Bless you.
irrelevant. But it was amazing though to see my mother and father who raised us. They were just really good souls. We would call them secular saints. But we knew we were so different from them. And then so to look in the face of those people from whom you came was really incredible to see. Yeah, genetic roots, it really is powerful. So that was very helpful.
Yeah.
And I think when I met my bio dad, as a secular humanist, I almost did a 180 right there, which was very helpful.
He was a secular humanist, or you were?
Oh yeah, he was. I don't know what he is exactly. And I was a secular humanist.
Okay.
But when I met him, I felt like I was looking into the future 20 years, like a big mirror.
Yeah.
And I said, I can't. So
Really?
Something's got to change. Yeah.
And you said your adoptive parents were secular saints.
Yes.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. So were you baptized as a baby?
We were baptized the United Church of Christ in the Trinitarian form, so it was a valid baptism, but the church that my parents went to was sort of like just a social club.
Okay.
Very nice. And their plan was to say, take them to a church, let them have a choice.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing.
Yeah. Sort of religious indifferentism.
Yeah, very much so.
So how did you? I actually don't know this story. How? And I know we got a long time to talk today. That's what's nice about long form discussions. We can get to everything you want to get.
Right.
But how? When did you decide you were a secular humanist, or did you not adopt that title, but were just that in essence?
That was in hindsight. You look back and you say, what did you believe in? And we were taught to believe in ourselves. We were taught to do what we wanted to do. So just a summary would be, in ethics, I would say, Mom, Dad, should I go rob a bank? And the answer was, well, weigh the pros and cons and do what's going to work for you.
They would not have said that about robbing a bank.
That's a quote. Oh, well, maybe not about robbing a bank, but other things I don't want to name.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, to this point though, I remember being at home in Australia, and I was inside the house, and outside the house, my family were having a barbecue, and so I was overhearing this conversation, and it took place between my cousin and one of our aunts, and she was talking about moving in with her boyfriend, and the lady actually said, "Yeah, do whatever makes you happy."
Right.
It's that idea, isn't it?
It's that idea.
Yeah. Which wouldn't be fornicating, presumably. That wouldn't make you happy, but you might think it will.
And that's not what they mean by that, right? Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what they mean. Move in with your boyfriend.
Yeah. Whatever you perceive that will make you happy. Yeah, and the big key is there's no standard. There's no objective standard. It's just a personal self-referencing standard. And that's what we had. So the weigh the pros and cons and do what's going to work for you really is about what you think about what's going to work for you. Not necessarily the right thing to do. Really, not at all. But my parents were moral. They would not have robbed a bank.
Right.
And I think they just assumed neither would we.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case.
Yeah, my parents were good people, decent people, you know. Decent people.
Sure.
They discovered my father discovered my pornography stash. He was okay with it. I think he just thought the plumbing's working.
Yeah.
He's attracted to women or something.
Right.
You know? So he didn't care.
Right.
He wasn't raised to think it was a problem.
Right.
Funny stuff, eh?
Yeah.
But I was at St. Greg's Academy a couple of years ago. I don't know if you've ever been.
I've never been, but I am such a fan.
It's
the
incredible.
people I know from there.
I'm going to have one of the guys on the show soon, actually.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Dear friend Sean Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, that's who's going to be on.
Oh, he's
hopefully this month or
fantastic.
next month.
Oh, wonderful.
He's glorious.
He
yeah.
is. Yeah, he's a soulmate.
But he, I was there seeing these boys chant in Latin at the Mass, play rugby like
Yes.
friggin' warriors.
Yes.
They were chanting this song to the Virgin Mary in French, and it was like a war song.
Yes.
And I at one point I was tearing up because I thought, I wish I had this.
Yes.
And this is perhaps overstating it, but I felt like I was raised on porn, heavy metal, and horror.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that is overstating it, right? I mean, but you know, that was.
I would say the same about us.
Yeah?
Yeah. In general terms, analogous terms, it's just complete secularism. It's very empty and vapid. Leaves you searching for that next thing that doesn't really exist in the form you're going after it. So we're in the same boat. It's terrible.
So how did you become a Christian? Well, you were baptized, but how did you?
I was baptized, which I really look back and I think that, you know, you can see, if you look back clearly, you can see that Christ courts you from the very beginning. And I could see that. But I really think it really started when I was in the schools with the kids, and I had this revelatory moment. I think I
As a
mentioned
high school teacher?
Yeah, no, it was an elementary school teacher.
Okay.
What happened was I went through school and
Yeah.
got my degree at University of California, Santa Barbara, got a sort of degree in history. But I left school with nothing to do but to be a substitute teacher because it was $75 a day, and I thought that was great, and I had nothing better to do. And I get in there, I realize I can't stand children, which was a problem.
That is that's going to be difficult.
Very difficult. But I got a long-term teaching job, and I remember one day the kids were in front of me, and I saw this kid, Federico, and I just felt like choking the life out of him. And they went to recess, and I thought, I'm 26 years old, and I'm going to have a heart attack and die. I hate this job.
Yeah.
And I had this revelation out of nowhere. God spoke to me and said, he taught me in an instant what agape was, what love is. And from the moment those kids came back from recess, I've loved every kid for the last 30 years.
Wow.
Easily.
Were you with him
no
then?
problem.
Did you notice the change too? Yeah.
Oh, it was instant, and it was a 180. And the real key to understanding why I can love every kid I've ever met is that you don't love the person for their sake. You love them for the sake of truth. And at the time, I didn't understand you love them for the sake of Christ. And in that sense,
what is, break that open. What does that mean?
So if I said, Matt Fradd, I love you for your sake because you're cool, you're awesome, you're magnanimous, all these things, and then you fail in those things, you've let me down, and I could not love you. But if I love you for the sake of Christ, it doesn't matter what you do. Fail, succeed, I'm still going to love you. It gives you the grace to love unconditionally. And I think that's the most core thing a teacher can do. And a parent does it naturally. They love their kids for reasons other than their own sakes. Now, teachers in general don't, which is why parents are so much more important as educators than teachers. It's a drastic difference. But the gift that God gave me in that instant, in that moment, was the beginning of my conversion. And it still took 15 years. Hard head, hard heart. Took me 15 years after that to get the fullness. But I started then to strive after seeking the truth.
So what was the path then? Did you go straight to Christianity? Were you?
No, I went to everything. First I went to the kids and said, if I love them, and they're bored stiff, they're in educational comas, something needs to happen here. And if I love them, I'm going to find out what's going on here. And so that led me down the road of discovering the myths and the fairy tales and the great works and those things. I watched the great works open them up and wake them up, so to speak.
Wow.
And in that sense, that got me to wake up. And because they were being woken up, I read more fairy tales and myths. And it led me to the Greek philosophers.
Yes.
I met Plato and Homer. Well, we got into Homer in 6th grade and things like that. And that led me to the philosophers, which led me to the church doctors eventually, the Romans, then the Bible. I was sort of dreading it. But more and more holy things started appearing in front of me.
Why were you dreading the Bible?
Well, I was anti-Christian, of course. Our family, we would mock religion. We would say, anybody who believes in a little old man sitting on a cloud is an idiot or crazy. Yeah. And that was just our notion. So we would mock religious people. Yeah. Even though we went to a kind of a church, but it was kind of a social church. But we were very, very sophisticated, very sciencey. And so it was just kind of like, I don't want to be a part of that because religious people are weak, was what we would say. So it's a lifelong build of revulsion. And my parents, I had trouble in school, so they sent me to a private Catholic school. Definitely not because it was Catholic, but because they thought it might help straighten me out. But it wasn't a very Catholic school.
Most aren't.
No, and I didn't know that. So, and I was even more revolted by Catholicism after that experience for just all the wrong reasons, or all the right reasons why somebody who's clueless would not like the Catholic Church. So
back to the fairy tales, because I love them so much.
Oh, so do I.
I think you returned me onto them.
Oh, good.
I've got this lovely edition. I sent a photo of it to you. I'll show it to you tonight. It's a glorious. The kids love them.
Yeah, you found it at a thrift store, didn't you?
No, it's way less cool than that. I bought it on Amazon.
Okay, great.
It's like the opposite.
Okay, shouldn't have brought that up.
But no, it's okay. But it's what is it about the fairy tales that capture us, and why are we not doing that today?
There's so much, and I think I have a really important answer as to why we're not doing it today. But it's almost an impossible conversation if you don't begin at the beginning. If you don't say something like, what is the nature of reality? It really is about understanding cosmology first to understand the story. Something Peter Crave said that was so beautiful. He said, the universe is the story of time seeking eternity. He begins there with the medieval cosmology. And this is about stories. The universe is a story, a series of events that seeks after something beyond itself, which is the creator. So Peter Creve goes on to say, it's like a huge circulatory system where God, the creator, the heart, pumps the blood of time and events through the circular system of the universe, and it returns back to God. And this is the image writ large of the story. And so in a most profound sense, we ourselves are a story because we participate in this cosmology, this universe. And cosmos means the order. There's a proper order. So
before we get to that,
Yeah.
I want to talk about what it is about fairy tales that captures that well then.
Oh, I was going there.
I'm sorry.
Definitely. No, I was going there. It's a 20-hour talk.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's the right question. So the fairy tale is just that there and back again theme
Yeah.
every time, but it's also a micro image of the universe, as all good stories ought to be. So here's the problem today, is that right now that is not our collective
Narrative.
cosmology.
Okay.
We would say, what's the earth? The Big Bang happened. Why? On accident. Everything is random.
Yeah.
Nothing's
The
on
working
purpose.
out of
Yeah.
mindless matter.
Yeah, they're working out. Yes, exactly. And so what our stories mimic our understanding of the universe. So our modern stories are so
Chaos.
bereft. They're chaos.
Yeah.
They're organized chaos, ordered to pathos. Whereas the medieval cosmology is ordered to logos. And that's the world of difference between.
What do we mean by pathos and logos?
By pathos, we mean pathos pathology is like the emotions. The highest thing in the universe of chaos is your feelings. That shouldn't be too hard to see in the world today, is that we hold as the highest thing our feelings. The highest thing in the order of right order is logos. It's understanding, logic, reason, intellect. The very image of God on our souls is intellect. So in the modern conception, there is no God. Man becomes his own priest, prophet, and king. And when you're your own priest, prophet, and king, you can order things any way you want. And we are encouraged by society to order it to the emotions. So most modern stories are very shallow, very vapid.
Can you think of a modern one that sort of captures that?
Well, almost every modern one captures that. But what's the
Frozen?
Frozen's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great
How
way
so?
to kill a fairy story.
How is that?
It just inverts the order of things. It makes, in a modern fairy tale, if you look at Frozen, it's the Ice Queen from Hans Christian Andersen was the motivation for it.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to read that and compare it to the movie Frozen.
Interesting.
And
I
Frozen
didn't realize that.
turns out to be sort of a self-fulfillment and be yourself, and it inverts the order. There is no objective order. It's, if you're magic, the world says it's bad. No, you make it good because it's yours. And so many rotten themes in that. So many dreadful themes. I know everybody loves the movie Frozen.
I don't know if everybody does.
Well, I don't know. I know a lot of people that get
Sure.
pretty upset when you.
Keep attacking it, though.
Yeah, well, Frozen's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Nightmare, and it's beautifully made, and it's clever, and it's charming, and it's adorable by appearances, and it really does appeal to that. Even the theme song, "Let It Go," not holding back anymore, doing your thing, just be yourself. And Elsa's magic hurt people, and it didn't matter. It even almost cost her sister her life, who in the end becomes the hero. It's just an inversion of everything. And if you look at man and woman in Frozen, every man in it is pretty much a loser. Kristoff is the one hero guy, and you just listen to the troll song about him. I mean, that's another thing, is that the trolls are the light bearers and the healers. Traditionally, trolls are pretty evil, right? Just inverting the order.
Yeah.
So Frozen's a train wreck, but it retains some of that magic of the fairy tale. It's like plundering the Egyptians. They brought these beautiful images in and some really appealing themes, and it looks good. But if you really analyze the thing closely, it's a culture of death endeavor. as opposed to the Snow Queen, not the Ice Queen.
I've got to read that.
The
Snow Queen. Okay.
Read the Snow Queen.
Yeah.
It's remarkably different from Frozen, but you see the images. There's a moose in it, and there's a lot of characters that are similar, but it's very well ordered and very beautiful.
Is there something to be said, though, about finding truth and help where you least expected it? You know, could that be part of the trolls as the light bearers? Does that make sense? Sometimes in life, people who we thought were wicked or bad turn out to be the ones that help us. Is that kind of? No, you're laughing.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I highly recommend not going to trolls.
Yeah.
For your advice.
Yeah.
So I don't know about that.
You know what's cool is like you read Lord of the Rings,
Yes.
and it's believable. The whole thing is it doesn't portray the wicked as good or the good as wicked, and I think maybe that's kind of what you're saying.
That's very much what I'm saying. It doesn't invert the order. It has a consistent moral order that makes sense. There's a great line from Aragorn when the writers of Rohan were saying, "How is one to judge these times? It's crazy." And Aragorn says, "We judge these times as men have always judged times, with what is right and with what is wrong." It was beautiful how he just put it back to the right order. And that's the case with us. Our entire world is turned upside down. The fairy tales are actually off-putting to somebody who's been conditioned.
Yeah, you'll hear parents say that. I would not read that to my children. It's too violent or scary.
I think they banned them, actually.
I would highly recommend anyone listening to this to go pick up a copy of the Brother Grimm's fairy tales, and to read them to yourself and read them to your children.
Yes.
They are so beautiful.
But they are off-putting at first. I remember when I first read them, I was kind of shocked. I was just kind of off-put. They're strange. They rub they rubbed my sensibilities the wrong way. I imagine if you're a faithful Catholic and you believe in the medieval cosmology, that they wouldn't be so off-putting.
Well, not only that, they're violent and scary.
Yeah.
But life is. Yeah. Life is a dark wood that you find yourself in sometimes.
Absolutely. And compare the Grimm's fairy tales with this dark and scary stuff, and you should look this up. The American Psychological Association has a list of top 10 recommended books.
God have mercy. What are
my
they?
Goodness. And they're exactly the opposite of the fairy tales, and things like how to feel great about yourself. You know, I can't remember the names. I wish I had them in front of me, but I don't think they would bother people, the titles. But if you compare them to the fairy tales and the proper worldview, they're very troubling. And it's this coddling and trying to make people feel good and building self-esteem in a completely false way. Whereas this violence, this true portrayal of life in the fairy tales is very helpful for children to confront these real things of a fallen world in the safety of their homes, in the comfort of their parents' presence. And it actually really forms a soul to be prepared not just for the transcendent, but to face life as it comes. They're entirely necessary, actually, for an authentic education. Entirely. And it's funny because it makes sense that the modern world is completely off-put of them. Completely off-put.
So you started reading these to your kids in the classroom.
That's right.
And do you remember maybe one that struck them and why it was that their attentions were so gripped?
Yeah, I think almost everyone struck them. And I remember one vividly. This first one I read that really was disturbing. If I have a minute to tell it, there was a maid working in a home in a land long ago far away. A maid working for an elderly couple, and she was their house cleaner. And she'd go every day and clean the house, but she just couldn't keep up. And the house got a little bit messier. Her patrons were getting mad at her. And one night, some fairies snuck in and cleaned the house for her. She gets up the next day, and the house is immaculate. She can't believe it. This went on for months. She was very grateful, and her masters were grateful too. And finally, the fairies revealed themselves to her and came to her room and said, "We've been helping you." And she was enchanted, and they became friends. And one day, these fairies invited the handmaid to a fairy wedding, and she agreed to go. So they took her on a walk through the woods and into a mountain and into a fairy kingdom where she witnessed a beautiful fairy wedding. At the end of the first ceremony, she said, "That was lovely, thank you, I must get back. My masters will wonder where I am." And they said, "Well, you must stay 3 days. Our ceremonies last 3 days, you can't leave yet." And they convinced her to stay. So she stayed 3 days and then finally said, "I must go back," and they took her back. She walks into her home, and it's immaculate, but it's empty, and there's a single broom hanging there. She runs outside and says to the first passerby, where are my masters? And they said, who? She named him, and they said, oh, they've been dead and gone for 40 years.
So what I'm getting from that is the idea that she was held bondage to her own sort of...
Well, we don't know. It's terribly disconcerting. It's off-putting, even.
It's glorious. I love it.
It's imagine the confusion.
What's nice is not to psychoanalyze these,
Right.
but to let them work deep down into your heart, to keep reading them to your kids.
Keep reading them.
Yeah.
But there's something more important. I think it's very dangerous to psychoanalyze or even moralize or even ask, what lessons do we learn?
Yeah.
There's something more profound. We ask, what are the realities to which these words point? Allow the story to be the lens through which you see and understand the nature of reality. And this isn't really done today because we've made an idol out of words. We turn the story into an object and make an idol of it.
As opposed to a what?
As opposed to a lens or the way in which we come to know and understand things in a more profound way. So there's a lot to discuss in that story that doesn't revolve around morality or psychoanalysis or feelings or how we feel about or respond to it.
Yeah.
We ask the question, what are the realities to which this story points? That kind of thing.
And do you want to give an answer to that?
No, that's a very complicated question. But let me tell you what C.S. Lewis said.
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis has a beautiful way of talking about literature and reading stories. And he wrote a book called An Experiment in Criticism that I would highly recommend reading after a while. But he says this, you have a story is made up of constituent parts. You have plot, setting, and characters, and a sequence of events. And these things are merely a net with which you seek out to catch something eternal, a state that can't be captured otherwise. And this state we're talking about is the nature of reality that we're really looking for. That's the embodiment of what we understand by metaphysics and natural physics and these real things. So it's a thing not dealt with in school because the modern school ignores metaphysics. It also ignores ethics. So that's almost a fruitless endeavor to say, what's the morality of this story? But I think it's a beautiful thing to think about reading these stories for the sake of reading the stories and rereading them and rereading them again and again because they're profoundly beautiful.
Yeah. It would be like, I've been walking, we have a trail at the back of our house. We'll go for a walk this afternoon if you want. It's delightful this time of year.
Wonderful.
But it would be like if you and I were walking, breathing in the cold air, and I was like trying to draw a lesson out of it. It's like, just enjoy it. It's beautiful.
That's exactly
and that's
right.
enough. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Stories are like that, or they should be, you think.
They ought to be. They must be, and they're not treated that way. We treat them like the frog in the laboratory. We dissect them. We analyze them. And remember what the wizard in Lord of the Rings said.
What
Gandalf. He said, "He who has to break a thing open to understand how
left
it works
the path of wisdom."
The path of wisdom.
Amen. Say it again because I cut you off. I
No,
want people to hear that. Yeah, say it again because you were talking about Sauron.
Yeah,
he spoke to Saruman. He
Gandalf
spoke to
was talking about
Saruman.
Saruman as the wizard, the white wizard, who became the wizard of many colors. You break open white, and you have all these colors. And Gandalf makes the point that when you have to break a thing open to understand how it works, you have left the path of wisdom. And it's so beautiful. And what he means by that, in dissecting it, we materialize it. We break it down into constituent parts rather than seeing the thing in its unity, its transcendental beauty and truth.
There's a great book called Fathers and Sons by Turgenev. You ever read that, Neil? Turgenev? He's a Russian author.
Yes, I've heard of it.
Oh, I think almost a contemporary, if not a contemporary of the others, Chekhov and Dostoevsky. Right. He wrote a book called Fathers and Sons, which I'd highly recommend. One day, the son and his friend from university come home to this simple family, and one of them's an atheist, and he's always dissecting things, frogs, cutting them up and to their most base parts.
That's right.
Which is what pornography does.
Exactly right.
Pornography reduces a mystery to its base parts and says, this is enough.
That's right.
Which is why the beauty of motherhood makes evident the horror of pornography.
Yes.
The first time I ever saw my wife breastfeed my son, I saw how ugly pornography is in a new way.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah. Someone smart said, you don't see too much, you see too little through pornography. Yeah, because there's that unity beyond it. It really is a very serious thing. And it's the same with stories. we divided them up. If you look at the modern curriculum, they take Shakespeare and they read an act just to show what a racist homophobe he is.
Right.
It's the death of true literature.
Which is why it's always more pleasant to read Plato than what others have said about Plato.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And read him with the same question. What's being said here? What are the realities to which he's pointing? Very, very important.
I want to, feel free to keep talking. I want to find this place in
the
Phaedo, because
yes.
we're talking this idea of the soul and the body. One ought to be the king that rules,
Yes.
I'll find it here in a second. Here it is. So this is from the Phaedo. This is... this is when he's about to die, I suppose. I think they're in the prison. Yeah, that's right. And Phaedo's recounting his conversation with Socrates before he drank the hemlock. Socrates says, "When the soul and the body are united, nature ordains the one to be a slave and to be ruled, and the other to be master and to rule." And I'd love you to talk about this, because it seems like for many of us, fallen man is apt to invert this order, but it also seems that much of our society and even much of the schooling system is there to invert that order as well. So the reason becomes a slave to the passions.
That's correct.
So if I wish to be a fornicator or an adulterer or a sodomite or a woman, then my reason must now conform to the insanity of my passions.
That's right.
Speak to that.
That's exactly what's happening. And Plato has that wonderful image of the chariot and the charioteer as the image for the human soul. You have two horses, the passions and the will, and then you have the charioteer, which is supposed to be the intellect. And you direct which horse leads. The charioteer does. But back to this is that we absolutely have inverted the order of reason and pathos, or emotions. And when you subordinate your reason to emotions, you make the reason rationalizing, not reasonable. You rationalize your choices you make based on how you feel. And that's writ large in the public schools. It's the MO. It's terribly evil, actually. Ends up being really diabolical in the end, to be a slave to your emotions, for one thing. And that's the kind of society we have. You can look at every news story today. It's about, you don't want them to feel bad, so here's what we're doing. And it's a dreadful, it's the absolute decay of society. And he's making the point there too. And it relates to the cave. When you judge things by images alone, by appearances, your emotions can be the arbiter of that truth and interpretation rather than your reason. So it's a loaded line.
Yeah, before we got on here today, you said that public schools are where souls go to die?
Oh, yeah. I would say that public schools are soul death camps.
Okay, and so what I'd love you to help me understand is this, but I also want you to help our viewers. I'm a parent of 4 kids, and it's tough. It's tough enough being a parent, and I just want... I agree with what you said, and I want to talk about that. I also don't want to turn anybody off who's like, bloody hell, I'm doing my best, and you're telling me I'm sending my kid to a soul death camp. Because I would honestly think that most Catholic schools, like maybe 90% of Catholic schools, I'd probably put in the same category.
Unfortunately.
But let's build the argument. Let's build the
argument. But let's start at the beginning. We have to first admit, I talked about the cosmology of the medieval age or the ancients, where we understand that there's a reason for being. There's an order to the universe and to society, and things make sense. But there are two different cities here that we want to talk about. And I want to go back to St. Augustine. St. Augustine wrote this great work called The City of God. And his prevailing theme in The City of God is that there are two loves, two kinds of loves. And from these loves come 2 cities. There's the city of God and the city of man. And this kind of love he describes like this. In the city of God, man loves God so much that he has contempt for himself, his own opinion.
Yes.
And this constitutes a citizen in the city of God. In the city of man, man loves himself so much that he has to have contempt for God. And that relates closer to the Phaedo than any other comment I've made so far. That when you have the two, there is an order. They're not equal. One has to be subordinate to the other. So you either love God in truth and subordinate yourself to that, or you love yourself and you have contempt for God. And these two cities are borne out beautifully in an explanation of what's so wrong with the modern school. If we look at the architects of the modern school, they are exclusively citizens in the city of man, where they love themselves and their own ideas about education and about society much more than they love truth. And for the most part, they're atheists. If you start with John Dewey, Benjamin Bloom, and all the architects of the modern school, they are, for the most part, experimental psychologists and atheists. They don't believe that man has a soul. They don't believe there's an interior life. And this is really key. George Bernanos says, you know nothing about modernity unless you first understand it is a total conspiracy against all interiority, against the entire interior life.
Yeah, please say that again.
Okay, I wish I could quote it better.
That's okay.
I got to get the right quote. George Bernanos says, you don't understand modernity unless you first understand that it is a conspiracy against all interior life.
Yeah.
Meaning there's nothing beyond the material. And so the modern school rejects all interiority, all immateriality. It rejects formal and final causality. It rejects all the things that are actually important about a school, including the intellect and free will. The theory behind the John Dewey type school that has morphed into what are now soul death camps says man has no soul, man has no free will. He is genetically and environmentally determined. That alone, that rejection of free will, leads to a kind of a soul death. And then the other horrifying thing is that even though we can't not use our intellects, the intellect is ignored because it's immaterial and it's interior, and it's replaced by something like the imagination and the memory. And I think David Hume did that in the 18th century, sort of substituted the imagination for what we understood as intellect. So in the city of man, you have this reduction to materialism that even if the schools have some moral capital from our past, and they do, they essentially, in theory, are soul death camps. Not all souls that go there die, because some souls have families that mitigate that damage. But in theory, they are completely corrupt. And that's a thesis that most people wouldn't agree with today. And so we should compare that to an authentic education in the city of man, a city of God that says man has a soul, man has an intellect, man has free will, man is fallen. I forgot to mention that the modern school rejects that man is fallen. They say man is good, and any desire you have is good. Therefore, they invert the order of morality to say, if you felt like doing it, it was a good, and who are you to judge? That kind of thing happens in the schools. Yeah. And that's the other inversion of emotions take precedence over reason, because reason has been reduced to rationality, which has been reduced from wisdom to knowledge to information, from intellect to brain, intellect to mind to brain. This has been the de-evolution of modern education. So when we talk about how you think, we're talking about neurochemistry. In the authentic education, we're talking about intellection. We're talking about the 3 acts of the mind, which is diametrically opposed to this, even though you see similarities in vocabulary. So
that's powerful. It makes sense. If you want to educate a human, you should know where they're from, what they are, and what they're for.
That's right.
And it seems to me that where you're from, who you are, and what you're for is, if you're going to answer that, opposite to what a Christian should say.
That's right.
Then you will naturally have a school system that's perverted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's beyond perverted. They've noticed that children that go to kindergarten stop asking the question why. We stop asking.
Really?
Kids go to school. Little kids are always asking why this, why that, why that, and it's beautiful. And they ask whys. But I always think now, I even think back to my own experience going to kindergarten. It's so sterile. It's so meticulous and ordered and in the wrong way and informational and lockstep, and everyone's in this programmatic, standards-based, outcomes-based learning where everybody's supposed to have the same outcome. It really is where all the Ys go to die. And unfortunately, even the chromosome. It's actually literally anti-male. It's anti-virtue. there is no virtue and vice in the modern school unless you invert the order of virtues and you say something like tolerance is a virtue, which it's not. Or if you say something like empathy is a virtue, which it's not. I have a mentor who told me that he doesn't even think empathy exists.
Let's pause a moment and dissect that.
Yeah.
Tolerance. Why isn't tolerance a virtue?
Tolerance is
There's a certain sense in which I could see it being a virtue, but maybe it's under another name, like meekness. Like if you're irritating me, but you're not doing anything immoral, it would be good if I was patient with you.
Sure.
But that's different to tolerance, maybe.
Yeah, and maybe by virtues, I'm making a reference to the higher virtues, like the cardinal virtues and the theological virtues.
Yes, I
see.
see.
People like to say that patience is a virtue.
But it is a virtue. Yeah. It's virtuous. Or if you don't want to categorize it under the heading of patience, then you have to put it under something else like fortitude.
It depends on what you're being patient about.
That's right. Well, that's what I just said, though. If you're irritating without being immoral, that's different. If you're doing something immoral, I don't tolerate it. Because I love you, I correct you.
Right.
Unless I'm a coward, in which I don't do the loving thing, right?
Sure. And patience can be a cowardly act. If you're being patient about waiting whether or not to advise somebody about whether or not they should have an abortion or something like that, it wouldn't be a virtue at all in that regard.
Okay, well, you tell me what this is then. Yeah. You have 4 children in a kitchen. They're all loud, dropping things, being annoying. Okay. What is that virtue that leads me to sit contentedly, understanding that they are just children and not snapping and yelling and bickering at them? What is that virtue then?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Is it patience?
I think so.
Okay.
Patience, meekness, gentleness.
Well, you see a different end. You see that this experience.
And this is what St. Paul says. The fruits of the Spirit are these: patience, peace.
Yes. And those are beautiful things. But
so when you say tolerance isn't a virtue, what do you mean?
I mean, well, again, it's qualified. We ask, what is it you're tolerating? And if we're asking to tolerate abject racism, that's an evil.
Yeah.
Be tolerant of the kind of racism we're promoting.
Yeah.
That's evil. Or to be patient with us as we persecute you. That's an evil. And it's not even an act of charity towards the person for whom you're being patient. So they're just they're fruits of the Spirit, but they must be qualified and understood as such. Whereas justice, the cardinal virtues they hold, and the theological virtues aren't qualified virtues in that sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So it's a different kind of thing. When we invert things in wholesome, the highest thing we have now is tolerance. That's the highest.
We don't even have that. I mean, what the left once said we ought to be, they are not.
Right. Right. Oh, it's a false virtue.
Yeah. Because you and I could say certain things on this channel that would have us banned.
Oh, absolutely.
Because apparently we have opinions
right.
that we've expressed already that will not be tolerated by a secular dogma.
That's correct.
There's no place for it.
Yeah.
It must be shut down. Yeah.
It's emblematic of the kind of contradictions that are asserted by the schools anyway. We are the most tolerant generation in history, and we're not putting up with this. It's just a silly contradiction.
A dictatorship of relativism, as Benedict XVI said.
Beautifully said, yes. So as we look at what they hold up as the highest things, these are not high things. And they are goods. It is a good to be tolerant in the situations
circumstances, sure.
In situations you recommend, allowing your children to enjoy themselves in the kitchen. There's a purpose to that. Now, if they started destroying things, it wouldn't make sense to be sit back and be talking. Well, they're just kids are being kids, breaking everything. That's different.
Being rude, and things,
being rude and those kinds of things. Which we are asked to be tolerant of very evil things in the schools. I think this is something that's missed, and this might be my biggest concern: is that when COVID hit and the lockdowns came, the modern school piped their agenda into every home through the computer.
Yeah.
And parents saw this.
And were horrified.
And weren't horrified enough.
Well, in places like Virginia, they might be, because they just elected a Republican governor over the nut job who said that parents don't have a right to sort of be the primary educators of their children, that it's the state.
That's right, but when I say they weren't horrified enough, I mean, I would have expected a massive exodus from the public schools when parents saw that and said, whoa, they're teaching this in the schools? I mean, there were guys coming out saying, please, parents, promise not to watch our classes. We're trying to condition these kids in anti-racism and LGBTQ agenda and stuff. They really were. And they asked parents not to watch. But even if parents did watch, not enough left the schools.
Amen, yeah.
That should have been the end of the public schools in a sane society.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean.
Is there any excuse, in your estimation, to send a child to the public schools?
There is.
And do you need to be
Yes.
a little more differentiating between certain public schools? I don't know.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I really like to emphasize the fact that theoretically, even if the schools are bankrupt, which they are, practically good things can go on. You have good neighborhoods with good people that come in and bring goodness into the classroom. So I think it's really a difficult thing to discern. But in theory, the public schools ought to be destroyed because it's diabolical. They are soul death camps. Children go there for their souls to die.
You're doing two things, though. You're kind of nuancing, and then you're saying something very blanket.
Yeah.
So if they're soul death camps, then it would seem to me there's absolutely no excuse to send your kid to a public school. But then you're also saying you've got to discern it. So which is it?
Well, I think there's no excuse to send your kid to public school, but I think there's reasons why we're in the position we're in today. It's not so simple as to say, let's be as sober as we were 150 years ago. We're not. We are as a generation, we are brainwashed. We are in a state of mass psychosis. It doesn't make sense to tell somebody who we believe now that the schools are an unqualified good. So when the kids are on COVID, you're like, you're robbing my kids of their soul death here. And they couldn't. It's one of the claims they make. We shouldn't have the lockdowns. Now, it's true we shouldn't have had the lockdowns. But you want to send them back to that when it's been piped into your home. That tells you that we're not in a position to say, oh, it's so simple to see. We aren't seeing what's being done in the schools because we've been conditioned for so long to accept these things. So objectively speaking, there's absolutely no reason to send your kids to school. Now, subjectively, we're just in this position where the society forces both parents to work. The society has promoted family splitting up. This makes things logistically very, very difficult. So there's reasons why people in hard circumstances may not believe they even have an alternative. So I think it's a very complicated question, and there's reasons why we send our kids to school. If you ask somebody, do you have a good education? The general answer is, well, yes, I do. I went to public school and I got a really decent education there. And that may or may not be true. But if it's not true, then it's weird that we think it is. That's kind of where we are.
Have you interacted with parents who've first been horrified by some of the things you've said and then have later agreed and done the hard work of taking their kids out of schools? Oh, certainly. Many. After the first time we did an interview, I had a bunch of people reach out and it kind of perplexed some of them and say, how can I do this? And a lot of times we've been conditioned to believe we don't have the expertise or the ability to be our kids' teachers. That's the line. Everybody believes that. And it's not true. It's not true. But everybody believes it. Like we said the last time, you could stay home with your child and do nothing, and it would be much better for them than what goes on in the public schools. But people need to talk those things through, and they need to discover that it is in fact true, that God gives you graces, that nobody loves your children like you do. So it's a very complicated thing, but a lot of people did reach out. And I had people write to me and say, I took my kids out of school because of your interview with Matt Fradd, and I was really grateful for that. Me too. But I think it's still a hard thing to do. Yeah. I think it's tough. And I would encourage anybody to reach out and have a conversation with me if you're not horrified so far. Would you like to give your contact information out? Absolutely. I love hearing from good parents, and it's just such good people that reach out. So have sincere questions about what's going on with all this. If you be sure before you say it, because you'll get a ton. We did this Jacob Imam on. He said he had 300 emails after he did this. So here we go. Okay. We could maybe put it in the description. What's your email? Yeah, stevenjonathanrc @yahoo.com. Wow, Yahoo. Good for you, dude. Yeah. Hanging on there. I'm really hanging on there. I want to get off. Dream. Yeah. I'd love to get off the merry-go-round. Great. I'm really intertwined. And I myself am a product of public schools. We'll put it in the we'll put it in the link. And if you have questions about whether or not you want to keep your kids in the schools, I would love to talk about or point you to some great teachers that would convince you otherwise. So, what's the do you think what's the most coherent and maybe persuasive criticism you've received? So, in other words, you think they're all bad. If someone disagrees with what you're saying about the public school, you think their reasons for disagreeing with you were bad. What I'm asking you is, what's the best bad
Oh, goodness gracious. Yes.
objection?
Okay. Unfortunately for me, I've had many better souls, smarter souls than me disagree with me.
I see.
And so I do want to say that at the outset. I was doing a master's program in theology, a reputable program, and my master's thesis was that theoretically in the public schools, there's no baby to throw out with the bathwater. And I had a really wonderful professor who was really bright. Much, I know he's a much better man than me and more intelligent. And he said, well, that's not true. And he disagreed, and we argued about it. And I didn't find his arguments persuasive, but I believed him when this happened 5-6 years ago. And I've been searching ever since to understand why he was right. And I haven't found it, which is probably my shortcoming. But what I have found is that I'm more deeply in an understanding of why I believe I'm right on this.
Yeah.
Is that theoretically, and I'm not saying practically, I know a lot of good people come. And his argument was, he said, well, look at the standards, state standards. He said, I teach in graduate school, I teach people where to put periods on a sentence and how to capitalize. I do this in grad school. That was his argument. I don't think that's a good argument, because if you're teaching grad students basic punctuation, that might tell you something about how the schools have utterly failed something so basic. But those standards in and of themselves, the things themselves, periods and punctuation marks, those are good things. And they are in the schools. What they're not is they're not proper ends. Those are just very minor means to a proper conveyance.
I see.
Grammatically. And in and of themselves, that's a good. But when you take a good that's a means and turn it into an end that's not an end, that's the problem. And so I heard Father Augustine Tran, he did this beautifully. Because the good argument is this, well, shouldn't we plunder from the Egyptians? And the answer is yes. Wouldn't Aristotle say, you take anyone in any system and pull out of it what is good? And the answer is yes, you should do this. But Father Augustine Tran said, if there's anything good in the public schools, it's because they plundered it from us. And then they subverted the order of it.
What about Catholic schools?
Unfortunately, you have the same drill.
Well, I mean, yeah, because I speak at a lot of Catholic schools.
Right.
Not so much anymore. And it's always hard for me to justify why a parent should keep them in there.
Yeah.
Mainly because everybody walks around with a soul death machine called a phone in their pockets.
Yes.
Everyone's sort of bleary-eyed and
Yeah.
uninterested.
Yeah. They cultivate kids. They develop. They really form kids to reject their faith. Is at the end of the day,
Catholic
that's what
schools.
Catholic schools do. In general, there must be some fine ones out there. I don't know where they are, but there must be some. There must be. And it's really nice that theology classes have the potential to be good. Weekly mass is wonderful. If a school does a rosary, that's beautiful. Those are good things. And generally, in Catholic schools, you have good families coming together. I think there are real benefits to going to a Catholic school. But I think the Catholic schools ought to also examine the curriculum, and they ought to reject what imitates the John Dewey and outcomes-based methodology. I just don't see how outcomes-based education is profitable to a human soul. And like I said, I can name some other people that disagree with me that are much, much better souls than I am, and I'm still trying to figure out why this is true.
They're disagreeing, saying what?
They're saying that, no, they're not all bad.
Right.
They're not. These aren't. I don't know if they're saying they're not soul death camps. It's hard to refute that when you have this... all the ideologies that are very obviously promoted in the schools. A hot button topic is CRT.
Yeah.
It's an utter lie to say that critical race theory is not taught in the schools.
Yeah.
It used to be called multiculturalism.
Yeah.
It was in the 90s when I had teacher credentialing. It said in the textbook, we want to destroy white hegemony. And we want to promote all cultures that are equally valid except for the white culture. And it was just blatantly racist.
Yeah.
Ever since the 60s. But really, it goes way back. This goes way back. But there's no doubt that abject racism is taught in the schools. I got to the point in my public school where I would sit down with my scholars and say, how many of you hate white people? And everyone would raise their hand. I just did it every year just for an experiment. And it would be 90+% would raise their hand and say, oh, of course we hate white people. And why? Because they're greedy, rich, and white privilege. I mean, these things are just abjectly racist, and they're not true. So that alone, I don't see any redeeming value of putting our children with people that promote that kind of thing.
Yeah, isn't that a sort of a counterclaim to the mainstream narrative that one ought to take their children out of public schools because they're racist, and not in the way that they might think.
Right. And just the opposite. It's really inverted, really bizarrely so.
Yeah.
And people believe it. By the way, I did get kicked out of that master's program. He said, we're at an impasse. You have to leave.
Okay.
So I do respect that professor for doing that.
For kicking you out.
Yes. Yeah.
Your wife doesn't.
Well, yeah, but we got, hey, it's an open question.
What's that? 3 years into a master's.
Yeah, but it's an open question is why I think it's appropriate. And honestly, I give the professor credit for knowing more about it than I do. The only thing I can think of where I might have a slight
State
advantage,
his opinion again for me, so I know what you're going up against.
He just disagrees that theoretically there's no baby to throw out with the bathwater.
In public schools.
Yes.
Yeah.
Theoretically. Now, I'm not talking practically. Again, I'm not saying everything. I'm just saying when you look at the design and what the theory wants you to do with things like Common Core and all its derivatives and all its antecedents, it's theoretically, it's just not fit for human souls.
Okay. Can you talk to that a bit more and say something other than what you've already said about outcomes-based education? Like, the problem with Common Core is what? And maybe you need to say that again.
I think Common Core is just one iteration of what's been going on since after the Dewey Schools, where we decide of a set of outcomes that needs to happen. This is sort of materialism. And then we backwards plan. It's not always bad. It's not always bad. But it can't be the predominant method of education, right, assuming that there's no interior life, assuming that man is not fallen, assuming that man doesn't have free will. All these things destroy any method when you have the wrong anthropology. So first of all, it has the wrong anthropology, has the wrong notion of reality. It rejects metaphysics. It's pure materialism, and it has a false understanding of human learning. Those three things preceding a method, if they're wrong, it doesn't matter how good the method is. Really. In fact, the fact that the schools are doing the method actually works for what they want it to do. They want to create cogs in a machine. Their stated end is to make you college and career ready. And those are not proper ends of an education. Those are practical things. They're good things, but they're not proper ends.
Yeah, this was my parents' fear when we homeschooled our children.
Right.
And we had some really kind of heated back and forth to the point where I said, I need you to stop talking about it now. Right. I love you, and I know you love my children, and I know this comes from a place of love, but you need to stop now if we're going to continue a relationship. It got pretty bad. And when you're a new parent, it's tough.
Yes.
It's tough. You don't want to screw your kids up, and you're hearing these different things from different people. Right. But what I've found is, like, my kids are wonderful.
Yeah.
They're bright-eyed and mischievous in the best possible way.
That's right.
My son, I said to him, if he catches a bird, he can keep it. And so he got he got a washing basket, propped it up with a stick, tied a very long leash to it, sprinkled birdseed under it, and sat there cross-legged for over 1 hour, just waiting.
Glorious.
He's such a beautiful boy.
Yeah.
And as my kids are getting older, I see them. My son Liam just read The Hobbit. My daughter Avila is currently reading Little House on the Prairie.
Wonderful.
But what's funny is my parents would never ascribe those virtues to their homeschooling education. Does that make sense? You're kind of damned if you do or damned if you don't.
Oh, absolutely.
So whatever good comes of it, they wouldn't.
They wouldn't attribute it to it.
Yeah. I should back off from attacking my parents, who are very good people, right? But it's like people wouldn't ascribe that. They're like, that's not because of, that's in spite of, or something.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I would say the opposite. Some people end up out of the schools educated in spite of, not because of the public schools. And you're right. Parents' number one concern is what you said. Well, if I were to abandon all this methodological, informational, whatever it is they do, how is my kid going to be ready for college or career?
Why should they go to college?
That's a really wonderful
question. I keep saying that to my kids. My kids want to go to college, and we're here at Franciscan, right, university here, and so it would be. I think it's a good school, but I don't know why they would want to go.
Right?
Why? Why would you want to do that? I'm like devil's advocate with them.
Yeah, I
exactly
the same
why.
Question.
Yeah.
There are very few schools in America I would want my kids to go to. My daughter Tommy, she's at Wyoming Catholic, and
what a blessing.
I'm very pleased with it. Yeah, there's a lot of beautiful things going on there, and of course we promote Thomas Aquinas College and Thomas More, and the list dwindles after that. rapidly.
Yeah.
So I mean, in all the world, I just don't know why you would send your kids to the kinds of colleges that we're seeing today.
What did
Really
Peter Kraft call it? A randy man's dream. He says you've got these spineless men and they're free whores.
Yes, my goodness. And why that? For
It's
your
kind of sad.
children?
Like if you're fornicating, it's like you're worse off than a prostitute.
Yes.
She's making money. You're an
Yes.
idiot.
Yes.
What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly right.
And I have to
Exactly
say though, Franciscan really turned this. What was his name? Father, who kind of really kick-started Franciscan again. His name's escaping me.
Yeah, I know who you're thinking of.
But Franciscan was at one point on the top 10 party schools
right.
in Playboy magazine.
That's right. Deacon Keith Fournier told us that.
See if you can find his name, Neil. I'm forgetting it. But he came in, he had a conversion through the charismatic renewal. He was already a priest.
Right.
Began to believe in the power of God, got rid of all the frat houses and things and turned them into these prayer houses. And
Right.
Father Scanlon?
yeah,
Yes.
Father Scanlon. Joseph?
Vincent Michael Scanlon.
Vincent Michael.
Yes.
Yeah, Michael Scanlon is what he went by.
Father Scanlon.
Yeah.
That's right.
Just loved the Lord.
Yes. Deacon Keith.
And we right now on Franciscan, there's Holy Mass at least 4 times a day. And it's never not full.
That's right. Oh, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, I was going to tell you, Deacon Keith Fournier, who works with Bishop Strickland now, was with Father Scanlon on the ground floor of that. And he relates that story beautifully about the 180 they did.
Yeah.
Which is nice. I don't know much about Franciscan other than that.
Yeah.
So I can't really
Speak to it, sure.
I can't speak to it, but in general, there are very few schools that form the human person as they ought to. And the schools we mentioned at least understand the nature of reality, the proper anthropology, and the nature of human learning, which is really rare but beautiful. And there is a reason to go there because you cultivate your intellect and you get your will formed properly. And that's a beautiful reason to go to school.
And hopefully you're surrounded, by good peer pressure, good men.
Yeah, you're surrounded by good souls, fighting the same fight as you are. And the idea is to encounter truth, to end by knowing the Logos, to end by being edified by truth such that you can live in virtue. And the schools that do that, they're definitely worth going to. And that's what the home should be, the domestic church. The home should be that place where we cultivate that.
Your point about modernity being waging war against the interior life. Now, let me tell you what I mean by interior life and see if we've got the same idea. It's that conversation that goes on within yourself when you're alone that's directed towards God eventually. The contemplating of things.
Okay.
But what does it you mean when you say
I think you're on the right track with me.
Okay.
I think we're close. There's a real danger with this conversation with ourselves. There's a distinction between the psychological and the objective. So we talked last time about the fact that the modern school has this interior dialogue they call metacognitive, where we think about our own thinking. And the modern school would call that the interior life, even though they reject the real interior life. But in the authentic school, you can't avoid psychology. You are yourself. But you can avoid reflecting on the nature of reality. You can't avoid reflecting on that thing outside of yourself that exists and is real.
Yeah.
And so this dialogue between what is objectively true outside of yourself and the interior life, which we call the spiritual life, which is your intellect and your free will, these are the interior constituent parts that are part of that conversation that you're talking about.
Okay.
But everybody has an interior dialogue.
Yeah.
Even the one who's totally self-centered, narcissistic, and enclosed in psychological psychodrama.
It's just not in touch with reality, maybe. Is
right.
that it?
It can easily be
Or
not in touch with reality.
but it seems to me what I thought you were driving at, and which might also be a valid point, is we're all walking around in a noisy world with our noisy headphones and with our phones beeping at us constantly.
Yes.
There's no time to even string a coherent sentence together in your own head.
That's right.
Because you're piping into it the opinions of podcasters like us. Yeah.
That's right. But you've made the interior choice to do that, maybe so you can avoid. Your best word in there is contemplation. When you contemplate, that's different than thinking about yourself or just really thinking about what you like or what you want. So we think about what is instead. So the interior life, we're really talking about your character, really talking about your habits, your possessions. What do you own interiorly that's intellectual and moral? These are the things ignored by the modern school. And I don't know if they're even ignored. They're undealt with in the sense that the kind of informational formation you get leads to a really bankrupt character with vicious habits and full of intellectual falsehoods. We believe the ideologies in the school. So ideology is a huge factor in what's wrong with the modern school. So ask the question, is there ideology in the school? And the answer is yes. Is that good for a soul to see through the lenses of ideology? And the answer is no.
What do we mean by ideology?
We should define that. So ideology is a fairly new term, 1850s, I think. And if we look at it, ideology, the study of ideas, it's Tony Esolen told me once, it's the worship of ideas. It's a religious thing where if you look it up in the dictionary, it says it's a set of principles usually directed towards a political end, and it's the lens through which you see and understand the world. So you might take a cause like feminism. To a feminist who's a true feminist, the ideology of feminism sees the entire world through the lens of that power struggle between a man and a woman. Mm-hmm. And that's a reduction of reality to that set of issues. So ideologically, even if there's truth in the ideology, to see that as the whole thing instead of just the part of the thing is the ideological mistake.
So it's like trying to see the world through a keyhole kind of thing. You're reducing the totality of everything. Right.
Yeah.
And it has to be made to fit into the lens of...
That's right.
How is faith not that?
That's a great question. It can be. Certainly can be. If you take a few precepts of the faith, that could be your lens through which you see and order the world. And if you don't have the totality of all church teaching and know that there's that and God beyond, then you're in danger of reducing things ideologically. So religion can be an ideological thing, but the one true faith can't be. But it's a matter of us encountering that and being open to it and knowing that we don't know all. But to reject any single part of church teaching is to reject the whole thing. In the same way that to assume ideology is the whole of the thing is to reject the nature of reality. Because one of the most important transcendentals is unity. There's a unity of being. And to think that we grasp it all would be a huge mistake. Right? To know that we don't grasp it all is fair enough. To know that certain things are true is fair enough. But to mistake the part for the whole, or to shove the elephant into the thimble, or how'd you put it? It's a great way to put it. You said,
I forget.
It was beautiful, but it was right. Oh, to look through the keyhole and think it's the whole world. Right. It's to invert the order of your vision and to lose sight of the fact that we are finite.
Yeah.
So ideology is very dangerous.
This is what scientism does, doesn't it?
Yeah, scientism is an ideology.
Yeah.
That simply says the highest way of knowing is experiential.
Or even the only.
Might even be the only in the case, and it's hard to believe that, but yeah. But even if it's just the highest way of knowing is through your own experience, that's tremendously disordering. And that is one of the ideologies promoted in the public schools, because it is based on your experience. It's subjectivism. Subjectivism is another one. The nominalism early on was that you can't know real things, you can only name them. And there may or may not be a relationship between that thing you name in your head and the real thing. This ideology alone damages the intellect or your ability to see things as they are, discover them, and to know what things truly are. So if the schools don't do that, which they don't at all, they would say something like, who are you to say what a thing is? I should relate the story. Faith and I we went into an administrative credential program. I said I had a company on it, and it was an utter nightmare. And it was just racist, and it was ridiculous. And they started the class off by saying, if you're white, be prepared to be uncomfortable. And be prepared to have those hard conversations that make you uncomfortable, right? And so this was just the constant mantra. They said, read, who's it, Robin DiAngelo's, what's that book called?
White Fragility.
Right, Fragility. I read White Fragility. We read Ibram X. Kendi, Stamped. We read all these ideological racists. We read them all. I did. I read them all. They recommended we read them in class, and they were just horrifyingly horrible. And
can you tell us why? Some instances.
Yeah. Well, in general, these race-baiting ideologues like Robin DiAngelo and Ibram X. Kendi, they say there's no such thing as objective truth here, and that's an objective truth claim. They begin with that, and they say they have. I should make a list and show it to you, but there are tons of philosophical problems like that where they say nobody can know how someone else feels, but I know how you feel. Right. They have tons of things like that. And I don't have them off the top of my head
Sure,
for you. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
interesting.
Drawing a blank. And I should come back to that because it's very, very important to understand why those guys are so wrong. I mean, Ibram X. Kendi says to remediate racism in the past, discrimination in the past, we have to have discrimination today. And that's just absurd, which means we'll have to have a different kind of discrimination in the future.
Yeah.
But let's not have discrimination because our whole argument's based on being discriminated against. It's just an absurdity that's easy to justify if you say there's no such thing as the principle of non-contradiction.
Yeah.
So they begin by denying the first principle of all reality. That's how they begin. And right there, that just makes the whole thing silly. It's just really weird. But in this class, I actually had a teacher reach out to me and say, you use trigger language in some of your assignments, and I'm very troubled by it. And then the administrator of the course reached out and said, I saw some of your writings, and it's very troubling. We need to have a meeting. We literally had an hour-and-a-half meeting where these two ladies, they met with me, and they started with by saying, we're very concerned. The language you use in your writing is very upsetting. And I said, what's the deal? They said, you used the words objective truth.
They did not say that.
Quote. I just quoted
Were
them.
you there? This is insane.
Yeah, she was there, and I videotaped it.
Please give it to me.
Okay, I'll try and find something.
No, don't do that. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, but the point is,
There is, yeah.
Yeah, and they-
well, I mean, we've skirted around it, but it's a self-referentially incoherent claim
Absolutely.
to deny truth.
that's right.
If you say there is no objective truth, this is an objective truth claim.
That's right.
So it's like saying I don't speak a word of English.
That's right.
I
don't speak
just
a word,
spoke 7 or 8 then.
Is that right?
So
Exactly
it doesn't
right.
work.
When I told them, I said, "Do you believe what you're saying?" And they're like, "No, do you?" You know, it's kind of weird. The teacher said,
sake.
"When you said objective truth, it made me feel like you were criticizing my teaching."
Well, maybe I was.
Yeah, and I probably wasn't in that line.
No.
Her teaching was
we're not
horrendous.
thinking of you.
No, we did think of her. It was
Oh.
she's the worst teacher ever. And then they said I was a racist, and I said, I told them, I said it's not right to say in class that everybody's a racist if they're white. And I said,
Unless you want to redefine racism to mean something intrinsic to your skin color that you have no control over,
Well,
right?
that's another
which is an
contradiction.
insane
Well, that's
way
what
of
they
using
said.
words. Yeah.
Yeah, they both, and I said, are you guys racist? They both said yes.
God have mercy.
One was an Asian lady. She said, I favor my people. And the other one said, I'm a racist on accident. I don't even know it. The white lady. This is a true story. This was the most absurd meeting I've ever had. It went on an hour and a half where we kept asking each other questions. And
they were giving presumably opinions they thought were true, objectively so.
they wouldn't admit that. They'd say, no, we don't think so. And I said, well, is that true? There was just no coherence to it. It was very unsettling for them by the end of the talk, and it was just horrendous. And I'm just going to say, they ended up calling my wife a racist because she asserted an opinion that was contrary to the class.
Your Native American wife.
Yes. And I reached out to the lady who called her racist. I said, why did you call a person of color racist? And they said, because she aligns with the enemy. At that point, what's left? And it had nothing to do with race. It had to do with economics. She had an economic point she was making.
Well, it's a way to dismiss somebody. If you don't agree with me, I call you a very scary thing.
Right.
A racist, which nobody wants to be called.
Right.
And nobody wants to be, hopefully.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's just a way to shut you down.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe the way communist was used back in the 50s or 60s or something.
Yeah.
I'm not
There's
sure
a
what
lot more
it'll be
truth to
next,
calling
but-
these people communists than there is to calling all white people
Well, now
racists.
it's a praise, unfortunately.
Yeah,
But I
unfortunately.
meant back in the 50s or so.
That's right. So I had dropped out of that program. It was a nightmare. It was so weird and so sad to think that an army of people are being trained to lead other teachers this way with such utter falsehood and such hatred. Just
It's beautiful.
so
I'm so
terrible.
excited
Yeah,
for
really.
what's coming. I am.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah.
You're excited about that?
I'm excited to raise, no, not excited about that, but I'm excited to raise my family in the truth.
Yes.
And I'm excited to do it with brothers and sisters in the Lord.
That's right.
In this little patch of earth called Steubenville, Ohio.
That's right.
And should we get run off YouTube and out of our houses? That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That may happen.
Being a heretic is fun, man.
A heretic, in the modern world.
against
Yes.
secular dogma.
That's right.
Insanity.
That's right.
May God give us the grace to persist in our heresy.
May God give us the grace.
You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's a tough road to hoe, the whole thing. If you can get your kids out of the public schools, it's highly recommended.
What's your caution to those who wish to align themselves politically with those who do hold certain true beliefs. I think many faithful Christians who voted for Trump were still turned off by those who seemed way too excited about Trump.
Sure. I think that's a legitimate worry.
Yeah, so I guess that's my point. I mean, in the United States, at least, we have, of course, viewers from all around the world. You can tend even to fall into this false binary where we have the Republicans who are the good guys and the Democrats who aren't.
Right.
Or vice versa, as if there's no other option. We're not imaginative enough to think of a world that doesn't involve this sort of duality.
That's right. Yeah.
But I'm seeing that in the church today as the insanity of the left grows louder and more frantic.
Yeah.
We're willing to align ourselves with any priest or president who says certain things that the others aren't, like abortion's evil.
Right.
And we'll be like, yes, and we'll get behind him 100%, but maybe he or she are saying things that are like, ooh, no.
Right.
It's this nuance is tiring. We would rather it be a simple narrative.
We wish.
Yeah.
We wish.
What's your experience of that been?
Well, drastic. I mean, we grew up in a home that was very liberal. So it naturally, me and my siblings became Democrats, of course, and before we understood really anything about anything. But coming into the church, I immediately had to leave the Democratic Party, of course.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that the Democratic Party, they are the ambassadors of a culture of death.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful book I recommend called Liberalism is a Sin. It was written over 100 years ago, I think by Father Felix Sarda. But there's no doubt that the platform, the culture of death, that murder in the womb, that these things that they promote, the LGBTQ agenda, and really even a lot of what's going on globally that is promoted by this party is irredeemably evil. So I don't think you can have a case where you're like, well, I'm out of good conscience, I'm voting with the Democrats. I don't think that's possible.
No.
Unfortunately, the Republicans aren't too far behind ideologically.
Yeah, it's like they follow whatever the liberals believed 10 years ago or something.
That's right, something like that.
I heard somebody say, I'm going to vote for who I think hates me less.
Maybe.
I like that. Well, yeah, that's why I would have voted for Trump, because I thought he seems to not sneer at me and hate me.
Trump gets the vote just for being pro-life.
Yeah.
Whatever else you think of his repugnant lifestyle or it's amazing that was our alternative. When in history, like, we have this scoundrel that we're behind. Well,
I think part of it was, and I'm not saying anything new here, but I think people were just tired of these soft-spoken, polite people.
Yeah.
It's like the insanity grew to such a pitch that we were looking for somebody to scream at it or hit it.
Maybe.
And
he fit the bill on that.
Yeah.
But he also did things that weren't horrible.
No, of course not.
There were reasons why you could, in good conscience, vote for him.
I think so.
But it is a little dangerous to become sycophantic.
That's what's scary.
Or to elevate Trump to something that he's not. I think that's a danger.
Or to anyone in the future. Like maybe we're critical of Pope Francis, and so we get 120% behind vegan. Or we're like, no, just...
Right. Yeah.
Because there's certain things that he said that I thought, well...
A little bit troubling sometimes, yeah. And he may be essentially onto the truth of a lot of things.
Yep.
But it's very, very confusing times. The smoke of Satan is thick in the air.
Amen.
And that's what makes things really hard to see. I know that myself politically, I'm an independent and will remain as such just because I can in good conscience get behind any party. But there is a great difference between the Democratic and the Republican platform that would make it understandable why many would be Republicans. So I can't understand why any faithful Catholic would be a Democrat, except you have some older generations that were part of the Democratic Party when it might have been justifiable to be so, if there ever was a time.
Where are we in 10, 20 years? I mean, for goodness sake, if I had asked you in our first interview, where will we be in 2020, 2021?
Yeah,
couldn't have
predicted.
Yeah.
The difference between then and now is so stark that it should have changed our conversation. I hope it did. I hope it's more stark now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wake up and smell the dead souls.
Wake up and smell
and do something
death.
radical.
Yeah.
Radical. There needs to be a radical break.
There needs to be a radical break.
I don't know what that looks like.
I don't know how. It's a kind of a waking up from a slumber. I think brainwashing is really, really prevalent in the age. And if you look at mass media, technology, and television,
we got to get rid of them.
We've got to.
You need to get rid of your smartphone, I think.
I think you're right. If I had more temerity and more courage and more virtue, I'd bring that thing in and smash it right now.
Why wouldn't you do it?
But I'm on call right now.
What if you blame me? Is that because I think I know who's...
Yes. Well, I have a new job. I should probably tell you what I've been doing since my last interview.
No, we got to talk
we
about...
should divert from this right now.
We need to talk about why you're not breaking your phone. Because you and I hold similar opinions. I'm not even sure I should have a dumb phone.
That might be a nice stepping stone.
It might be a stepping stone.
To freedom.
Yeah. Then the answering machine.
I'm ball and chain to it.
Well, stop it.
Well, look, I got a couple other excuses you might find lame.
All right.
But I FaceTime my granddaughter every day in Texas from California. I FaceTime my Kenya every day, my daughter.
Get an iPad and keep it in the top drawer and use it.
How is an iPad any better than that iPhone?
You don't carry it around with you. Or just have a laptop and FaceTime her through that.
Yeah, I haven't done that. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. That may not happen today, but I like it.
Yeah, think about it.
I like this encouragement.
I'll buy you whatever dumb phone you want if you get rid of your smartphone.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have to get some
Faith.
therapy. Okay, Faith, we're going to have to get some therapy and see if we can work through this.
It's one thing if you and I had different opinions about the interior life and distraction, then I wouldn't feel so bold to push that upon you.
I'm glad you did, because I'm being cowardly in saying
well, you might not be. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think you think I'm right.
No, I know you're right.
So if you know that I'm right, then it is cowardly for you not to destroy it.
It is cowardly. It's hard to go cold turkey.
Then shame on you.
Shame on me. I'm ashamed of myself.
No, you're not.
In public.
You're
I am.
not.
I am.
I don't know if you are.
I'm embarrassed. Am I turning red?
No.
I'm not?
No, but I don't believe that you're ashamed of it. If you were, then
let's put it another way. I'm sickened by it. I'm sickened by my attachment to the media. I'm on the computer every day. I'm working every day.
So how do we get out of this then?
Because
I agree with you. I'm also a coward, and this is why I think I'm taking stepping stones out.
I like the stepping stone.
5 years ago, I got off social media. Yeah. Somebody else runs that, right? I started giving my phone away on the weekends to friends and then picking up on Monday morning because I was a coward. So I think it's just this...
I think that's okay.
Yeah. So what do we got to do something more drastic than just make sure notifications don't pop up constantly. Like that's the best you can do.
I just did that last week.
It's something, but it's not enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm on a baby.
There's stuff I should do. Like what did I do the other day? My wife and I were hanging out. And I think I said, let's watch a show. And we did. Yeah. You know, I could have done something more beautiful. And what we watched wasn't edifying.
Right.
It was titillating, but it wasn't edifying. Coward, shame on me. So I should repent and change.
I don't know if you should go that hard on yourself, but you can identify things like that. You don't want to be puritanical about it or rigid or materialistic about it. I've got the tentacles of technology pretty deep rooted in my
how will you
tortured soul.
Untwine them?
I'm not sure. We're gonna have this conversation. I'll text you next week.
When
we'll
I
see if we can
come into the office, my computer's there with email, so it's not like I've unplugged entirely. And people always accuse me of being a hypocrite for running a YouTube channel, but I want them to stop listening to me.
Yeah.
But I want them to get off the internet entirely.
Right.
I want them to pick up some good books and drink coffee with their spouse or their friend.
Yes.
And like read Plato together and
that's right.
Drink bourbon on the porch and smoke cigars and talk about death.
Yes.
Don't listen to this. I don't want you to. But if you're online, this is an edifying discussion to listen to.
This is better than most of what else is online.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a worthy endeavor. Yeah, it really is a conundrum. And I don't think you're being a hypocrite by doing this.
No, I'm not being a hypocrite. A hypocrite is somebody... A hypocrite isn't somebody who fails to live up to his own standards. A hypocrite is somebody who demands something of everybody else that he won't accept.
That's right.
So that's not. I don't think that's what I'm doing.
No, I don't think so either. And we're working towards it. We recognize the difficulty of technology. You said you're reading John Senior right now.
Yeah.
And in Death of a Christian Culture.
Could you talk about him for a while? Because I love what I've read, but I haven't read enough to know much about him, except that, well, he was sort of a convert and.
He was a convert, and he started the IHP program at Kansas, which was a wonderful integrated humanities program, really wonderful. And he drew so many good souls in and drew converts, and eventually, I think the school only lasted 10 years because the rest of the faculty wanted them gone. It really bothered them. So
they would go stargazing and have ballroom dancing, and they would sit up on a stage, smoke cigarettes, and just talk about philosophy.
That's right. He would have rooms full of people and talk with his professor friends and have these great dialogues. And it really drew people into the classical tradition.
And then converted them all.
Yeah, converted a lot.
Too many people were converting to Catholicism.
That's right, yes. It was a huge problem for the university itself. And then and offshoots like Clear Creek Abbey.
And then Norcia? Some of the monks from Norcia in Italy?
That's right.
I think.
Or France.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
I think some
I might have
monks
it
in
wrong.
France. Just a wonderful bunch of offshoots. Schools. I think St. Gregory the Great, they're disciples of
I would say certainly
Sean
disciples
Senior,
of.
and then St. Martin's down in
Kansas?
Fort Myers, Kansas. Yeah. Is it Fort Myers?
Yeah, I know it's in I believe it's in Kansas.
Yeah.
I forget the name.
Yeah, southeastern Kansas. I think it's Fort Myers. But wonderful schools inspired by that, and recovering the poetic imagination and the moral imagination through great works, through song, through poetry, and it's just wonderful what Senior did. One thing I really love what Senior did, there's a story where he talked about a kid who didn't do well, and he was going to fail out. He brings the kid in, and he says, hey, listen, if I just scrap your grades and give you B's, will you just come back for another semester? He said, okay, I will. And he came back, and the grades didn't matter, but he delved into the classics and became a Catholic convert. And I think he wrote a book, if I'm right about who this was. But really, really important to understand that Senior understood the human person and put that human person above things like grades, these arbitrary kind of false measurements of how somebody does in a school. And I just love that about Senior. I think so much good came out of that. I think it was someone we ought to all look back to. He wrote The Death of Christian
Most people
Culture.
don't know who he is.
They don't know who he is. John Senior, and he wrote The Restoration of Christian Culture. He wrote, I think it's unpublished, but a thing called The Idea of the School. Have you seen that?
I haven't read anything of his.
Oh, you haven't? You just started just now?
I'm just dipping my toes in.
Okay.
Think about how much more radical I'm going to be at the end of this.
Oh, it's wonderful. Read Senior if you're at home.
We can't have lighting. We need candles. Only candles to light the set.
That's right. He said smash your televisions.
Oh, yeah.
Smash them. Get rid of them. They're ruining your lives.
So why do you have one?
Because I'm a weak, little pathetic man.
Yeah, me too.
Same thing.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, we took a step when we moved to Steubenville. We got a TV that wasn't a smart TV.
Oh, nice.
And so now we just have like good DVDs that we buy from secondhand stores and things. And if the kids want to watch a movie, it's not ideal. That's the problem. I'm not sure your thoughts on the temperaments.
I don't know a lot about them.
Well, okay. Well, if they are legitimate, I tend to be of a more melancholic.
Okay.
Right.
Fair enough.
I'm very idealistic.
I see.
If I can't do it exactly right, then I may as well do the opposite, or not at all. Like if I can't pray the rosary every night with my family while we kneel on glass, broken glass, then we may as well just never pray ever. Okay. It's that kind of thing that I need. It's not mature. It needs to grow up.
Sure.
So that's why I find difficulty in degrees of separation from this stuff.
Okay.
But it's something to celebrate.
Absolutely.
Because we had a smart TV before.
Right.
But the first month or two, the kids were complaining and begging for it, and they stopped now. And they barely go down into our dank, cold basement where the stupid TV is. They don't want to do it. It's ugly and cold.
They'll forget it quickly.
We're going to get rid of the couches soon and just put like metal chairs. Yeah, you're
Get
welcome.
that glass for the floor. We're doing the rosary again on the glass.
That's
good
right.
idea. Faith and I did something similar. I think it was after reading John Senior. We literally cut off cable, everything. Okay. We had the DVDs and the TV, but we did that for 8 years. Beautiful. And the kids didn't ask. And we had rules. The TV doesn't go on during the week. This was good for us. And we did this for 8 years. And then we moved back to California and got the smart TV. And we have Amazon Prime. And we have just sunken into depravity as a result. But, the kids are out of the house mostly.
It's worth striving to get out of, isn't it?
It's worth, No, those were the best 8 years of our kids' lives, just to not have that incessant garbage piped into your home. It was wonderful. It was a great thing to do, and I think Senior did inspire us to do it. I remember Faith read Restoration.
Collie, what would he say about today?
Oh, my goodness.
This is back in the day of...
in 36, he was a cowboy, right?
36?
I think he was
black and white televisions?
Well, no, I think John Senior, when he was... I don't remember how.
50s or 60s? When did he live? Was it around then? Or?
No, he was into the 70s or 80s.
Oh, okay,
Yeah. No, when he was a young boy, though, he ran away from home, I think.
That's right.
And he hit the range. He went and became a cowboy as a very young man.
Let me see. The nice thing about this dumb phone is it sends photos.
Oh.
But I sent you a photo the other day, and I want to share that one excerpt from his.
Oh, yes.
That I just found so moving. I haven't got my glasses, so we'll see how this goes. The immediate practical purpose of drinking a cup of coffee is to wash the biscuit down. Its proximate ethical purpose is the intimate communion of, say, cowboys. They do exist. Will James was right. Standing around the sullen campfire in a drenching rain, water curling off Stetsons, over slickers, splashing on the rowels of spurs, as they draw the bitter liquid down their several throats into the single moral belly of their comradeship. The remote political purpose of coffee at the campfire is the making of Americans, born on the frontier, free, frank, friendly, touchy about honor, despisers of fences, lovers of horses, worshippers of eagles and women. The ultimate purpose is spiritual. For a boy to drink a can of coffee with cowboys in the rain is, as Odysseus said, something like perfection. And he was quoting Odysseus from, what is this, Alkino's Banquet? Or is that how you say it?
That's not how I say it. No, that's how I say it, yes.
So this is from the Restoration of Innocence. Isn't that beautiful? How do you write like that?
Yes.
You start by smashing your phone.
You start by smashing your TV.
On Pints with Aquinas.
Yeah, and he ran the gamut. He studied everything, Confucius, Buddhism.
That's
I think he
right.
looked at it all. And then he encountered Thomas Aquinas.
That's right. He was sort of into Eastern mysticism
Yeah,
prior to.
as many were from the
Yeah.
Transcendentalists and Thoreau and Walden and
Yeah.
all that, Emerson. But then he found Thomas and found his most edifying and solid philosopher. And I think that solidified his soul.
What's the most beautiful poem you've memorized?
Oh.
Or the poem you're most proud of having memorized? Or have you ever memorized a poem?
I've never memorized a poem.
Okay.
Shamefully. How about you? What's your favorite?
Grandeur of God.
Okay.
Yeah, by
You can recite it for us right now?
The world is charged with the grandeur of God. It will flame out like shining from shook foil. It gathers to a greatness like the ooze of oil crushed. Why do men then now not wreck his rod? Generations have trod, and all is smeared with trade, seared with trade, bleared, smeared with toil, and wears man's smudge, and shares man's smell. The soil is bare now, nor can foot feel being shod. And for all this, nature is never spent. There lives the dearest freshness, deep down things. And though the last lights off the black west went, oh, morning, at brown brink eastward springs, because the Holy Ghost over the bent world broods, with warm breast and with, bright wings.
That's beautiful.
This is lovely.
Thank you.
Do you know how much cooler it is to memorize that than some line from The Office?
Yeah. That's a lot cooler.
Significantly.
Yes, dramatically cooler. No, that was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that.
How do we get back to that?
Smash your TVs. Get me to smash my phone.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll hold you to it.
We need to talk. We need to visit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's right. It's so tragic. We're in the grips of something really dark right now.
But amidst the darkness, there's idiots like me memorizing poetry and sinners going to confession. And
Oh yes. Yeah.
we have the beautiful Latin Mass here on Sundays here, and people bring their gaggle of kids, and they're beautiful. They're just beautiful. There's a nobility to them.
Yes.
They want something good.
Yes.
So
and they
that's
are
good
good.
to see.
And
They are.
This is a time for that. I think it's a time to wake up to the truth and to value those beautiful things. But also it's a time to act. It's a time to stand against, I think, the tide of what's going on. To take up arms against a sea of troubles.
How do you do that? How do you do that while you're trying to have your children raised in what's true, good, and beautiful? I guess it's not either or. You're trying to teach them about the goodness of the world and the reality of the world, and pushing back against the insanity of it.
Yeah. I think it's a huge risk to stand up against the tide as it is. To stand up and say that the things being said in public aren't true. I'm terribly disturbed by what we see on the news. Things like, we don't watch the news often, but I do follow the media just as a cultural critic. And to watch what's being said and to see how abjectly untrue things are and how obvious they are, but how unwitting the public seems to be about it really troubles me. So I think the first order of business is to go on the quest to recover truth. To ask the question, does truth exist? And if you answer no, it's over. You're done. Does truth exist? Is there an objective reality?
Can I know it is the next question.
And then can I know it? And if you answer no to any of those things, then it's a lost cause. It's a lost cause. And it's ironic because the people that answer no to those things said yes to believing those things. It's very bizarre.
Let me unspool here for a little bit and get your take on it. One of the reasons I love Pints with Aquinas is I like the frank, free, perhaps too free conversations that take place at 1 a.m. in a rundown bar, with some bloke or Sheila about life and in vino veritas. I love that. Drunkenness is evil and ugly and a sin. To be clear, but there's something when people let their guards down and they can share openly and honestly that's lovely. And it seems to me, and I've shared this in the past, but that there are 5 fundamental questions we are all very interested in. And you can tell me if you think there's another one to these. Have you heard me say this? I don't want to bore you. Where did I come from? Who am I? Why am I here? How should I live? And where am I going? Can you think of another one?
Those are profound. Those are vital.
I can't think of anything more profound than those things.
Right.
But it seems to me, and I'm open to being challenged or wrong about this, that if atheism is true, we have dogmatic answers to each of those questions.
That's right.
And, here's how I'd put it. Where did I come from? You have been coughed into existence with the whole universe by a blind cosmic process that didn't have you in mind.
Right.
All right, good. Who am I? You are merely the result of matter plus time plus chance. Why am I here? And to quote Richard Dawkins, at least in this case, why is a silly question.
Yeah.
At least objectively speaking. Yeah. If there is no objective answer to why the universe is, then it follows, it seems to me, inescapably, that there cannot be an objective answer to the question, why am I here?
Right.
There is no reason. There's no reason to the universe. You're part of that. There's no actual mind-independent reason. Right. Okay. Right. So, but then you might protest and say people find meaning in many things. They want to end this thing or fight for this cure but these seem to be like self-imposed delusions to get us through the long days and longer nights. Right. Right. You can think that's the meaning of your life. It isn't. It might make you feel better, and maybe that's nice to feel better. It's more pleasant a feeling. Okay. How should I live? I've never been able to get on board with an objective morality that doesn't have an independent mind issuing the commands. If there is no God and there is no meaning to the world or to your life, how you should live is really up to you. This is the one life you have, and you might decide to live in a way that's conducive to the flourishing of your group and your society. And people will give you badges and clap for you and tell you what a good person you are. Right. But you might decide to be a bastard and hurt and rape. And people do these things. They're deciding to do these things. And suppose you say, well, why are they wrong? Well, because society has said they're wrong or something. Right. But society is just other yous. And you have no moral authority over me. You're unequal to me. Yes. If you say, well, it's been sort of bred into us somehow through evolution, well, this process that I now understand and can articulate is beneath me. Surely that can have no claim upon me. Well, you say, well, it's so that we can live a more pleasant life that we've come up with these rules. That's why you've come up with them, but it doesn't show that they're actually grounded anything ontologically substantive, And then finally, where are we going? This is like the opposite of a Matthew Kelly talk, but he's very positive. Yes. You're going to die sooner than you expect, and people won't care. Just yesterday or 2 days ago, a friend called me and said his son-in-law just died of an overdose alcohol, and he was in his early 30s. I was sorry for him. Yeah. I said a prayer for him, indeed. Sure. But I don't care in the sense that it doesn't impact my day. I went home, had dinner, forgot about it. That's what we'll do for you. When you're dead, there will be a time that somebody thinks of Stephen Rummelsburg for the last time. There will come that day. Someone will think of you,
right.
and then they'll die, and then no one will ever think of you again. At some point, that'll happen.
Sure.
Right? So we're going to die individually, but then cosmologists speculate that even as a species we will die. As the universe continues to expand and uses up energy, it'll eventuate in what they call heat death.
Right.
So you've just got this broken up universe scattering through infinite space forever.
That's right.
And I forgot who it was that said it, but this is the horror of modern man, because he ends in nothing.
Yeah.
He is nothing.
Right.
All right.
And he begins
There's
in
my
nothing.
little preachy.
That's the worldview today.
Now I don't know how to get around that. Now that's not an argument for God's existence.
No.
Not at all. It might be that bleak.
That's a description of if God doesn't
It
exist.
seems to me that
That's what is. And as
yeah.
Dostoevsky said, all things are permissible if that's true. There's just no limits to the depravity or anything. Nothing matters. That's so nihilistic. It's nihilism.
Yeah. So it's not an argument for God, but it's an argument to question your atheism.
Well,
Because it's not beneficial to live a hopelessly awful, drab, bleak, meaningless life. I'd rather that not be the case. So I need to be self-reflective and.
Well, it's important to ask. Well, is that true? Is that the ground? And the modern world says yes, it is. That follows Cartesian methodological doubt that turned into skepticism, which today turned into radical skepticism or hyper-skepticism. The life of disbelief. So that's your choice. You're either like Augustine, who says, I believe it in order that I may come to understand, or you're like Descartes, who says, I doubt it. Doubt everything until you can prove it to yourself. That kind of thing. So that's just an extension of Cartesian radical doubt.
So at the heart of reality then is order or chaos in a sense.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. It's either order or chaos. That's your choice. Either you recognize the order in the cosmos, or you assert
the meaninglessness
it's
of it.
Chaos.
Yeah.
That's meaningless. And if it is meaningless, it's just bizarre.
What results?
It takes quite a bit of faith to believe this is meaningless. Quite a bit more faith to believe it's meaningless than to believe that there's order. Every single breath you take and notion you have and thing you do presupposes that there's an order.
I want to throw this out here too. It was Lewis who said, sometimes as a Christian, I have these moods where I think the whole thing's very unlikely and it seems very strange, and I begin to think that maybe I've bought into some mass deception. Yeah. But, he said, I also had those thoughts when I was an atheist. So it seems to me that, like, without faith, one can either be a solid Christian or a solid atheist. And I just sometimes think that, like, the moments that occur, it just strikes me like, this is very strange. Maybe this is just bullshit. Like, maybe the whole thing is rubbish. But then I think, okay, well, it might be. I don't think it is. But just playing devil's advocate with myself. But how very strange is life? I might not know how to explain how I get from here to heaven or what heaven is, but it seems to me a lot more difficult to explain how I went from nothing to here. And this very, very strange thing that I call reality, that has fingernails and ear hair that grows at an alarmingly fast rate the older you grow. For reasons I cannot fathom. I don't want to distrust my body.
Right.
I presume it knows what it's doing.
Think you need those ear
but
hairs.
Why I need it to grow, continue. But chaos or
chaos or order. Those are your only two choices.
But for many of us, or all of us, I see what you mean. Deep down, it's that. Yeah,
at the deep down. Yeah, it's hard to deny. It's hard to deny order when every single aspect of your life adheres to it to some degree. Even if you choose disorder, that's the order you chose. So it's really a bizarre thing. It's a very difficult thing to say. Today, I'm going to choose to try to discover the truth. The one who says there's no order says, I'll be the arbiter of truth. And that's a tough thing. I read this little line here. I'll see if I can find it again because I found it very compelling. Socrates is talking about what it's like when you think something's true and then you discover you're wrong. And this happens repeatedly. You begin to doubt the reasoning process altogether and make the claim that we actually can't know truth. Let's see if I can find that. But that is a position that many people are in, isn't it? Yes. Was it the ancient Gorgias who said, there is no truth, and if there were truth, we wouldn't know it, and if we could know it, we couldn't speak about it? Yeah, those are 3 self-referentially incoherent statements. Yes, yeah. Exactly. All asserted as truth claims. Yeah. Yeah.
think I can find it now.
Yeah, it's a beautiful line, and it captures where we are today. It captures the heart of the sophist,
Yeah.
who says, yeah, you can reason yourself into believing there's no such thing as reason.
And then you find yourself to be quite the most reasonable of men at that point.
Yes.
You deem yourself to be. It's a cynicism.
Yeah, it's a form of cynicism. Chesterton said that everyone in an insane asylum, they're not unreasonable, they're only reasonable.
What does that mean? I've heard him say it from orthodoxy, I think, but
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
from
really know what it
orthodoxy.
means.
It means that reason, untethered from reality, it can lead to its own sort of insanity.
Oh, I see. So it's reason detached from reality.
Reason, right? Only reason. If there's only reason, it can devolve into rationalism very easily. But you have to reason about something. If you reject that something exists, and you only have reason, then you have self-referential echo chamber. So there's an interesting epistemological principle that the intellect is infallible. Think about that for a minute. No one would allow that. The intellect is infallible, meaning what you think.
Mm-hmm.
You there are three things the mind does.
Mm-hmm.
It apprehends what is, it makes judgments, and it reasons to new knowledge. That process happens no matter what. Now, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with it, right? Depending on free will and how we choose to order things. But the three acts of the minds themselves happen. We have the capacity to abstract from an object a universal principle of understanding, a form, and it becomes a concept in the soul. We do that. We all do that infallibly. So it's not to say that the intellect knows everything perfect. It's not to say that at all. It's just to say the intellect works. We are reasonable beings. We are rational animals, and that's just universally true, barring defect. But the modern world wouldn't say that. They would say it's like trusting the senses. We would also say epistemologically that your senses hold out the capacity to infallibly take in what's there, to receive what is there, barring defect. If you're blind, you can't see what's there, but your senses can take what you are around and know what and take it in as a proper perception. But you see, the modern world attacks. You can't trust your senses. That's what the modern world says, and then you can't trust your thinking. So these two things.
So what are you left
denied.
with?
Your feelings.
Yeah.
Right. So you can't even trust your senses anymore. And the key there is that, sure, you can trust your senses. What you can't trust sometimes is your interpretation of what the data you're receiving.
Have you ever read the Space Trilogy by Lewis?
I've read it. It's been
I've
a long
started.
time.
I'm not gripped by it.
You're
but
not?
No,
Okay.
it's my fault, I know. So I'll keep plugging away.
Keep plugging away at that.
But there's that a bit at the beginning where he pops his head out of the spaceship for the first time. And there's this wonderful line, Lewis puts it far better than I'm going to, but something like, he didn't know what he was looking at.
Yeah.
And it all seemed like colors to him, because in order to sort of make sense of it, you have to sort of know what it is.
Yeah.
So there's this simple apprehension, but then a judgment has to be made about the thing, which, as you say, furthers our knowledge.
Yeah.
But I thought that was a really interesting point of his.
It's a great point, right? If you encounter something you've never encountered before, at first
You don't know how to grasp it yet.
you may not know how to grasp it, but in a sense, you may know how to grasp it. It may be different in some really foreign place like outer space, but here on Earth, you could see a new species and not be too terribly alarmed, right?
Yeah.
Kind of grasp and form a concept of the idea that thing is probably one of many similar things like it. So the gift of abstraction, that's something animals don't have.
Yeah.
They don't perceive and abstract a formal cause.
No.
So, or an essence. We understand an essence of a thing. So the human mind works the way it works. And I find it amazing that that's not known in the public schools. The three acts of the mind don't exist in the public schools. There's no discussion of them. They have these things called higher level thinking skills, critical thinking skills from Benjamin Bloom. And he has those as, what's he call them? Understanding. He has this list of higher level thinking skills he called critical thinking skills. And they're all material. They're all below the line of intellection and free will and deal with your interior senses of memory, imagination, common sense, and estimative sense, and your five senses. So it's really interesting that they call those the higher level thinking skills, and they ignored the three acts of the mind. So there's no direct cultivation of the intellect in the modern school. And you can't not use your intellect, but you use them to focus on these informational reductions of it's really materialism.
So you've studied this more than me, and just to put it real simply, or hopefully not inadequately, although I guess it will be, you got Descartes,
Yeah.
you've got Hume, who I believe denies causation. We have instances of things that happen
Yeah.
after something else, and we attribute causation to them, but we can't know it, we can't experience it.
Right.
Even the self, I believe Hume was skeptical of.
Sure.
You have Immanuel Kant, who tries to save science, in a sense, by saying that while we cannot know the world as it is, we can know it as it appears to us,
Yeah.
right? A sort of, what do you say?
Non-idealism.
Yeah. But then it seems like the next step is, no, the world is as it appears to me, not us, me.
Yeah.
And I don't know
Yeah.
if I said that right, or
I
maybe you
think
could
you
fill
did.
in the gaps there.
Yeah. I think we're talking about Bishop Berkeley there,
Okay.
who said, to be is to be perceived. He was an Anglican bishop, and the one for whom the People's Republic of Berkeley was named, I think. Bishop Berkeley, have you heard of him?
Yes.
And so he bridged that gap between us or we and me, right? To be is to be perceived. So we get this notion of, well, if a tree falls in the wood and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? And Bishop Berkeley says, no, of course not. To be is to be perceived. And that makes it radically subjective. And that's sort of taken a hold of the modern imagination, and that's sort of the new thinking. So much so that at UC Irvine, I heard a professor say, if we're looking at the moon, that's not a moon. It's something different for everybody. If we're not looking, it doesn't exist. But if you're seeing the moon and I'm seeing the moon, it's actually not the moon. For you, it's an existential threat, and how you deal with it will determine your survival. And for me, if whatever it is, it's an existential threat. And that's sort of the thinking today. It's utter buffoonery. But this is UC Irvine professor. In fact, there's a video online of this guy, can't remember his name, who explains that kind of radical subjectivism. It's almost as if you, as the perceiver, make the whole reality around you.
Well, this is transgenderism.
Solipsism. Oh, absolutely.
Too, yeah. I mean, I looked into transgender surgeries, and they'll take a bit of your body fat and make a penis for you if you're a woman.
Is that right?
Well, they can make you a vagina.
Right.
We don't sell them at Best Buy yet, but one day they might, and we could do that and get you a vagina for yourself. And the fact that we can sit here and stomach this insanity.
It's insanity. Oh, and you would be in a lot of trouble for saying that in public.
Yeah, well, I just did.
I'm glad this isn't being recorded.
Yeah.
So
Live. Imagine if it was live.
Oh,
That would
even
be the
worse.
worst. Can't edit that
Can't
out.
take it back.
Yeah.
This would be really bad. Yeah, so you wouldn't dare say that in public.
No.
But isn't it insane today? And that's the kind of stuff being pushed in the public schools as well. This kind of thing, that you are what you perceive yourself to be.
And anything of the objective order that runs contrary to your wishes is violence,
Yes,
including the body,
that's right.
including
violence.
God's law,
Yeah,
which is a delight to the soul. You and I were reading that psalm this morning.
that's right.
God's
Greater
precepts.
treasure than gold.
Great, yeah. That's what we want to
Delight to
get
the
back
soul.
to.
Yeah, and it's terribly disconcerting. Yeah, I have a family member, a niece who tells us all she's a boy,
Yeah.
and it's just
Bless her.
heartbreaking.
Bless her.
Just heartbreaking. And she's going down the full road of doing this thing, and my family calls her a he,
Oh,
which it just reminds me of 1984.
it's a lie.
It's just untrue.
Yeah.
And when my mom or my sisters call her a he, I say, that's a girl, and
Yeah.
they look at me like I'm crazy.
No, because you love her. You
I
want to
love
have
her,
compassion.
yeah.
But
That's right,
compassion
that's right.
cannot be
Yeah.
given through a lie or a series of them.
That's right. Yeah, and my beautiful daughter Tommy told her, listen, we love you, but we're not okay with you going down this road because it harms you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't taken well, but my Tommy really gave it in the spirit of charity and truth. And I'm very proud of her for doing that.
Bless her.
But it's a very difficult conversation with my own family, and it's separating us even further.
Yeah,
We're
it
pretty
will.
separated.
Yeah.
We don't agree on anything anymore, and I mean almost anything at all. But this has made it much more difficult for us to relate to our family. So it's very divisive.
You know what I've loved about this conversation is, even though we're looking into the black hell that a sort of materialist universe leads us to, we're also, I think equally so in this conversation, have spoken about beautiful things.
Yeah.
And
Let's hope so.
and
Let's hope
sometimes
so.
conversations like this can just degenerate into look how bloody awful everything is and
Yeah.
without hope. But I mean, we've been reading poetry
Yeah.
and talking of Plato and
Yeah.
beautiful walks, and you summed up a fairy tale for us.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So I suppose
many
that's
beautiful
important,
things.
isn't it? We
It's
have
very
to
important.
remain
yeah.
in what's beautiful.
It'd be easy to get desperate. Be easy to be dejected or even despondent in this climate. But I think there's no shortage of good people out there, good souls, good faithful souls.
Amen.
But I still believe there needs to be a much greater awakening to
Yeah.
what's really being done, because it's just this sort of soft tyranny
Yeah.
that washes over us like a warm bath.
Yes.
And I think that's very dangerous. The future doesn't look good if we don't come together and wake up in true charity and honesty and action with manly virtue. That's the thing that needs to be recovered.
You know, manly virtue, yeah. Jordan Peterson offered a prayer on his YouTube channel like 2 days ago.
Did he?
It was glorious. Did you see it, Neil? It was really
Good for
lovely.
him. Oh, really?
Yeah, it was something to the effect. He begins with "Dear God" and ends with "Amen." Quotes the Our
nice.
Father,
Nice.
But it has to do with the way in which our country is tearing itself apart right now, and
Yeah.
yeah.
He's awake.
yeah,
Yeah, I think he's coming to it. Hopefully.
yeah,
He's a man who has good conclusions. Commonsensically, a lot of good common sense. Yeah, we need more of that. Yeah, really, I think it's such a dreadful time because men are being called to stand up, and I think men can. But when men do, they get viciously savaged. They get attacked. I think the term toxic masculinity is the club with which you hit any man who stands up and stands up with manly virtue,
yeah.
which is a thing that's just not acceptable unless you're watching a woman do it in a movie or something.
Yeah.
It's very, very bizarre, very strange. But that's what we really need. Essentially, we need men to step up with virtue and with charity, and to stand against the tide of lies.
And I think that, as we've been saying or alluding to, certain radical breaks need to happen
Yeah,
because we're soft.
so soft.
And we lull ourselves into insanity with Seinfeld binges and
Yeah, that's right.
which is very clever, very, very clever. Seinfeld's very funny, makes
Sure.
lovely observations that are very insightful, but it's also filled with fornication and the insanity of that. It's very sad to watch Seinfeld because it seems like back then the country was running on the fumes of Christianity.
Yeah.
And so, you have these, Seinfeld has parents, he has aunts and uncles,
Right.
like an intact family that he refers to.
That's right.
But he lives like a gigolo.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it is sad for that reason.
And you see now where it leads to this.
Yeah.
This is what it led to.
Yeah.
But we're sitting around justifying our entertainment.
Right.
And I understand what you mean when you say we don't want to. I think I understand what you mean when you say we don't want to be puritanical or rigid.
Mm-hmm.
Although we could maybe stand to bend that way.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
You're probably right.
I don't.
There's
yeah.
no soft
Do you
approach
think
to it.
I'm rigid or puritanical?
No. Oh no.
How would one know that one is?
You're taking baby steps in terms of
Yeah.
disentangling. That's so not at all. I think the thing you were mentioning before, you want to get the big picture. You want to get the whole thing. And I think you do definitely.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to sound accusatory.
You didn't.
Good.
But my point in asking that is who is rigid and puritanical knows that about themselves.
Well,
we
yeah.
need somebody to tell us or point out why.
I think I was hinting at something else. This isn't a prescriptive like you do these 10 things.
That's right.
And it's done.
No.
This is a work of character, which is probably not really
Not done on
understood
the outside
today.
either. It's something interior.
It's an interior
Yeah.
work where by a well-ordered desire, you want to attain to the truth of a
Yeah.
thing, or you want to attain to the
yeah,
virtue
you
of a thing.
can detach from technology and be a bastard.
That's
I mean,
right. That's right. It's not a matter of just smashing the phone and
No,
the TV.
no.
There's a lot of interior work that
Yeah.
has to happen. And in fact, the smashing the TV will probably be a fruit of the good interior work. So I was making a reference to the puritanical being
Yeah.
that list of things. If you do these 25 things, then you're a good man.
So
It's not the way it
I would
works.
have I'd have a problem, right, if someone came out and said like to watch Seinfeld, just to keep using that as an example, is intrinsically wrong, right? I'd have a problem with that, and I would offer my reasons in response to why they shouldn't say that.
Sure.
But I think we might have to your point about the warm bath
Yeah.
running over us.
Yeah.
we sometimes talk as if that applies to everybody but ourselves.
Right.
Because to the person who's being lulled into sleep by the so-called warm bath, we would say, violently resist, get out. Okay, so we should probably apply that to ourselves, and what does that look like? And I think many of us are just sort of unwilling to disengage from the propaganda that's under the veil of entertainment that we continually ingest.
That's right. That's right. No, I think you're right. It brings to mind this inversion of there's the fact that we exist, that we are beings, and then the world, and by virtue of our being, we have an essence, and from that essence comes this playing field of potential activities, and we do things. So we talk about the fact that we exist, and then because of our existence and our attributes and our form, we can do these certain things, but we've inverted that order and come to tell ourselves that what we do determines what we are, rather than what we are will determine what we do. So when someone asks, what ought I to do? They ought to rather ask, how ought I to be? And I think this is the inversion that we need to cover. We need to really recover these habits of being, because that's where the interior work takes place, is that cultivating the habits of being. Habit means to own, to possess, a permanent disposition. And from that disposition, we act. And we tend to think that from the way we act, we acquire the disposition, which is also true. It's reciprocal, but one's primary and one's secondary. And the habits of being come before the habits of doing.
That has really kind of sort of infiltrated our language. We say to our children, what do you want to do when you grow older?
Yeah, we never ask.
As opposed to, what kind of man do you wish to be? Should you be?
Yeah. What kind of man is a good man? Well, and that's the other thing, is we don't know that good and true as transcendental realities exist as such. We reduce those to material constituent things. Like kids, you ask kids in school, what do you want to do when you graduate? I want to have a good job and a good house. You know, the things they want to have are exterior, right, and require money. So I want to work at a good job. They tell you what they want to do, not how they want to be. And that's universally problematic today. And the inversion, the materialism says that what you do is what you become. You know, Batman says it. It's not who you are underneath that matters. It's what you do. You know, and it's exactly the opposite. So it's a hard recovery.
Good.
Yeah.
It's not what you do that matters. It's what's underneath.
Yeah, it's what's underneath, because what's underneath will determine what you actually do that's of value. You know, the well-ordered man is less likely to commit a crime than the criminal who's trying to behave himself. You know.
Yeah, this is sometimes brought home when you see somebody who, from all appearances, is a vicious person.
Yeah.
They're very, very rough, shouting in public at their wife or their kids and swearing at the top of their lungs. And I've swore here in this show, so hypocrite, perhaps. But there seems to be like a baseness. You know, we've all perhaps encountered people like that. And you see how unfree they are. And then you have to do the hard work of applying that to yourself and see how unfree I am because of my baseness still. And I think the lie is, if I were virtuous, I'd be less free, less happy, more constricted.
That's the lie.
But if you can see someone who's base and vicious and then contrast them with somebody who's fully alive and loves the Lord, you know, you're like, okay, that's the way to life, not that way.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a perfect point. Because the material freedom of doing whatever you want is completely different than the interior freedom of possessing habits of virtue, which is truly liberating, truly liberating, as opposed to doing whatever you want. And you see it. People do whatever they want. You know, in the pride parades, those things are really terrifying.
Yes, they are.
And those people are living in the delusion that they're free when they're truly interiorly slaves to viciousness. That anybody sober and sane would be deeply disturbed by. So I think it's the great way to put it, that materially freedom looks completely different than it does interiorly. And the kind of freedom we strive for is in the book of John, right? If you abide in my word, you will be my disciples. And when you're my disciples, you'll know the truth. And when you know the truth, that truth will set you free. That's really, really vital to understand in the interior life.
Yeah. What I want to do is take a quick break, and when we come back, we got a lot of questions, no doubt, from people in the comment section.
Great.
And we'll chat about some more things there. Cool?
Awesome.
All right.
All right, I want to say thank you to Ethos Logos Investments for supporting this show, elinvestments.net/pints. I guess when I was a bit younger, I thought that investing was something that only rich people did, or old people did, or rich old people did. I didn't realize it was something that I should be looking into as well. And when I began looking into it, I realized I don't want to invest in companies that are doing immoral things. And that's where Ethos Logos Investments comes in. They were founded to work with individuals and institutions within the United States that seek to infuse their morals into their investment portfolio, with portfolios that adhere to the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops' Responsible Investing Guidelines. You can be sure that you aren't profiting from intrinsic evils like abortion, embryonic stem cell research, pornography, or human trafficking. Please go check them out. Ethos Logos Investments is what they're called. elinvestments.net/pints. There's a link in the description below. elinvestments.net/pints. For employers, they offer socially responsible and Catholic 401k and 403b options as well. So yeah, go check them out, elinvestments.net/pints. Securities offered through Securities America Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Ethos Logos Investments and Securities America are separate entities. Advisory services offered through Securities America Advisors Incorporated. Yes! The second group I want to thank is Hallow. Hallow, HALLOW.com/Matt Fradd. Hallow.com/Matt Fradd. Hallow is a fantastic app that will help you to pray and meditate. It's not like new age mindfulness apps that lead into wrong ways of thinking. This is 100% Catholic and it's super sophisticated. If you go to hallow.com/Matt Fradd and sign up there, you'll get a few months for free before deciding if you want to pay a minimal amount every month to have access to their entire app. Now, you can download the app right now and you'll get access to certain things for free. So be sure to check that out if you just want to, play around with it and see what they have to offer. But if you want access to everything that they have, like sleep stories and Bible studies and all sorts of beautiful things like that, you have to pay a certain amount every month to get access to that. If you want access to everything for a few months, just go to hallow.com/Matt Fradd, hallow.com/Matt Fradd, and sign up there. Thanks.
And we are back, Steven Rummelsburg. What is Rummelsburg?
It's a German name.
It sounds German.
Yeah, it's a German name. It means noisy town. It's what they used to call the circus.
The Rummelsburg.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Noisy town.
You are part of an endeavor down in Tyler, Texas that I wanted to ask you about.
Yes.
Tell us about what's going on down there.
Yes, I think a lot of people have heard about this. There's a new community developing called Veritatis Splendor. And it's a kind of a long story, but it began with Rich and Carrie Beckman,
right,
who about 19 years ago founded Regina Coeli Academy, which was a small hybrid homeschooling co-op.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea of drawing good families together to homeschool their children, but to meet 2 days a week and have wonderful instructors, kind of caught on around many communities. And today there are 25 Regina Coeli Academies, 23 in the United States and 2 in the UK.
Yeah.
And
God bless her.
Yeah, God bless her.
What a good woman.
Yes. And if anyone has interest in homeschooling, leaving the public schools, this is a really good alternative. Because it draws together really, really faithful families, and the curriculum that's made is designed. They're aiming for classical Catholic education.
Yep.
And but I think the real magic of the Regina Coeli Academies are the people it draws together, good, faithful people who want to be for their children what they're supposed to be and get support in doing so. So that's, I think, a wonderful alternative for people that are trying to find ways to get out of the public schools. With a group of 25 parents, you can open a new Regina Coeli Academy.
Yeah.
And they've spent a lot of years developing the curriculum, so a lot of the really difficult work is done for you. and you can afford to just be with your kids in a really healthy way. So that started 19 years ago. And to try to make a long story short, all that had happened with the pandemic and the shutting down of the churches and the withholding of the sacraments led to this inquiry by Carrie Beckman and Janet Smith to start the Easter People,
Right.
where they were seeking out dioceses that were still had their doors open and were distributing the sacraments. The most profound diocese they found, the most beautiful and open diocese they found, was in Tyler, Texas, under Bishop Joseph Strickland, who kept
We've had on the show.
Yes, you've
He's
had on the
sat
show.
in that seat.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness!
what a man.
What an honor! Okay.
Yeah.
And what a wonderful soul! What a great bishop, and a great leader of souls. He's a fisher of men, and he's honest and good. And he kept his doors open. He distributes the sacraments. He's sober and wise and sees things as they are.
He's humble too.
He's humble. He's
You
a
listen
good
to that
man.
interview I did with him. If I would try to, ask a question, did the bishops make the right decision? What he'll say, well, I can tell you how I failed. Like everything kept coming
right.
back to how he failed. It was really an example.
Yeah, he's a remarkable soul. I have great admiration for him and the work he's doing. And so did the Beckmans, because they got together and decided, Carrie and Rich Beckman decided to sell everything in Atlanta and buy 600 acres of property north of Tyler, Texas, just empty land, in which they have the vision to form a community of souls and several institutions, the most important of which is St. Joseph's Oratory, where we will have a community of faith centered at the heart of it is the church and the patron saint of fatherhood, St. Joseph's. And besides St. Joseph, there will be a K-12 Regina Coeli Academy and a university, a Catholic, classical, faithful, authentic university. And the rest is a formation of houses and properties where people will come together. We will form souls there in the hopes that we will send them out to be in the world as salt and light. So besides the university, they have 6 other institutes planned around culture, life, media, liberty, law, and human rights.
Wow.
And we want to have these centers to form apostolates for people to go out and open centers, things like pro-life centers that learn the philosophy behind why life's so important. And then they learn practical things like how to fundraise and lobby to work in society as we ought to reform the law to make it correspond with natural law.
And you're moving from California there.
Yes.
Are you excited to move out of the insanity of
Well,
California to paint with a broad brush?
absolutely.
There's very good
No,
people there, for
no,
sure.
this is it's a dream come true to participate in this endeavor to help form a university that's faithful and authentic, that holds out the potential to intellectually and morally form souls to be salt and light in the world. It's a dream job. It's been an answer to my prayers since my conversion to participate in the reformation of our beloved Catholic schools. And I get to work with this project in a profound way, and that means the world to me.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and there is a very providential fingerprint of God, I think, on all this, because
I got a story for you after this too that was remarkable. Somebody prayed, they saw something. We'll get to that in a sec, though.
Okay.
It's remarkable.
Okay.
But what's the fingerprint you're talking
this
about?
is remarkable too, I think, as a sign. And my prayer after my conversion was that I would be able to be instrumental in reforming Catholic education and bringing it back to its glory and its beauty in the right way, inspired by the grace of God, and of course, as a pencil in God's hand. And when I look to where I was called to do this, it's just remarkable because it's in the Diocese of Tyler, and it just turns out that on my birth certificate, my name was Baby Boy Tyler.
Really?
Before my adoption.
Wow.
Yeah. And further than that, it's in Smith County. And on my adoption papers, it says Baby Boy Tyler Smith.
Wow.
That was my name. So I just thought
What
that
a
was
blessing.
a
It's
nice
beautiful.
providential fingerprint.
Indeed.
That I meant to come here and work for the Lord in the vineyard. And that's what this is. And it's going to be a labor of love. And I hope...
Is there a URL for that right now?
Yeah, I think it's Veritatis Splendor.
Would you mind putting that in the description, Neil, for those who want
Yes.
to learn more about it?
If you want to see that. And we're in the process of developing a website for the university.
So, I mean, we knew the
hear this.
Beckmans in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And we were sitting down having a meal, just on a double date, Rich, Carrie, me, and Cameron. And that's when this idea was first proposed. And Carrie said she feels like the Lord's calling her to do this thing. Whew. And I tell you, if there's any woman out there who could do it, or any human who could do it, it's Carrie Beckman. So it was really cool to kind of be there from the beginning.
Yes.
And I was discerning whether or not we should move there. We eventually chose here, but I flew down with Carrie and some others to Houston, and then this very wealthy, generous fellow flew us from Houston to Tyler. We had not seen this property yet. So we were going, and Janice Givens, is that her name, Neil? Janice Givens, what a woman. Man, she's like a prayer warrior. So we're all in a hotel the night before. Janice has come to pray about whether this is the Lord's will. Not if she should move there, but if the Lord wants this to happen here in Tyler, Texas. So that night, Janice and another lady, not Carrie, were praying. And Janice is more charismatic in temperament, you know. Yeah. And she said, well, let's pray and let's ask our good Father to give us a sign as to whether or not this is what the Lord wants. So how do I do that? That's a bit strange. Well, that's okay. Good God, he'll give you an image. So they prayed, and prayed with this woman first. What image are you getting? And the woman said, just peace. Just a deep peace, which is like, might be true, but like a super easy answer to give.
Sure.
Janice prays, and she says, I'm getting pin the tail on the donkey and mushrooms. What does that mean? Are you on mushrooms? Where is this coming from? She is telling us this on our way to the property. Yeah. If she had have told me this after the property, I would have wondered if she kind of like accidentally made it up or made it more dramatic than it was. Right. But I was with her before Janice or I had ever stepped foot on this property. Knew nothing about it except it was a big chunk of land. So we show up, and lo and behold, we see a donkey without a tail. And the previous owner, said, yeah, the other donkey bit its tail off. We thought, well, that's very strange.
Yeah.
And she said, you don't have mushrooms on this property, do you? No, he was quite convinced there was no mushrooms. A few minutes later, they found a tree with mushrooms round all the lower part of the trunk, all the way up. Isn't that lovely?
Yes.
How good is our Lord?
So good.
Again, if she had have told me that after the fact, I would have been like, did you really think that? Is that, you know?
Yeah. Oh, I love it. There's going to be providential signs all over the place.
Yeah.
I think. And to do the Lord's will is full of dangers.
Yeah.
And full of trials and tribulations.
Amen. Yeah.
So it is a real question. If this is of God,
buckle up.
Then let it be.
Prepare yourselves for an ordeal.
Buckle up for the attacks. It's already been. There have been many attacks which are to be expected. It's not a bad sign.
No.
So we're expecting a really difficult road, but it's so exciting. It's just so exciting. And I'm in the process right now of writing we're calling the Green Book, which is sort of an imitation of Thomas Aquinas College's Blue Book, which is their governing and foundational document.
I've heard it's beautiful to read.
It's a beautiful document. And we want to write one similar to it that's appropriate for the age, which I would say we are most definitely in an apostolic age, as opposed to an age of Christendom.
Indeed.
So there are dramatic differences between this age, and yet it's always the right thing to do to seek after truth. Yeah.
Well, let's see if the people in the live stream, if you have a question, if you're a super chat, we'll get to you, and thank you if you do that. Neil, feel free to.
So we have one from Rewire the West, which says, question for Steve, what is your favorite work of literature from the classical Western canon?
Wow, unfair question, but I love the name. What was that name again?
Rewire the West.
Oh, I love that name. Good, yeah, Rewire the West. Listen, it's got to be the Bible, of course, but I really find myself enthralled with the Odyssey and about 100 other books, but those really stand out. And I've been reading the Republic a lot lately. There's just so many things. The works of Thomas Aquinas.
All right, you go to an island.
Yes.
And you've already got the Bible in your backpack. You're allowed only one other book.
Only one other book.
Now, the answer doesn't have to be, this therefore is my favorite. It might be for some other reason. But what other book of Western literature, other than the Bible, do you take with you? You're only allowed to read the Bible, and this other book, what is that other book?
Oh my goodness, this is tough. Well,
we have 5 seconds because the ship's leaving. Okay,
today
so
it's going to be either the Odyssey or the Lord of the Rings.
Wow.
That's what it's going to be today.
Wow. You know, I've never read the Odyssey.
You haven't?
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
ashamed to
goodness.
say it.
Okay.
Will you help me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, let's read that together.
I would love
Let's do
that
it. It's
so
such a
much.
It's such a heart-rending book.
Yeah.
So beautiful and so important
Okay.
about coming home.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
We have another one from Ryan Casey.
Oh, Ryan Casey. You know Ryan?
I know Ryan.
How?
We just met at Napa.
What a guy.
God, I ran into him and I worked with his little sister, Neela.
Hmm.
She was the first lovely young soul to come up to me at Holy Spirit.
Could
Introduce
be a
herself.
different Ryan Casey, couldn't it? He's redheaded.
That's my Ryan.
Yeah?
this
Redhead,
is my
beard, just got married.
Did he get, well, congratulations, Ryan.
All right.
I didn't know that.
What's the question?
No, this is Ryan. I know Ryan.
He says, "Good day. How do we grow and nurture wonder in our children inside of school and outside of school? How do we get them to keep asking why?"
Oh, number one, keep them out of the public schools. And number two, just be there with them. Just be there with them. And then number three, get great books. Get great stories. Start with Aesop's.
And not just great books, but good books.
Good
Isn't
books.
this
Yeah, get
part
good books.
of...
Absolutely.
So
And-
talk about the distinction.
Yes, yeah. No, good books are the leading up to the great books. You're right. You know, I mean, you don't get your kindergartner the Iliad. But definitely start with the fairy tales and start with the good books. There's a huge list of good books. I'm trying to think of, if you read Michael O'Brien's Landscape with Dragons, in the back there's a glossary of all kinds of good books you can get. Really helpful. So read with them, be with them, celebrate the sacraments with them, take them to Holy Mass, daily adoration. These are the things you can do.
Get into nature.
Get out in the open, get rid of the screens, smash your TV. Just be with them, be present with them, and cultivate virtue in the home.
And find other friends
Yeah,
that you
find
love
other
to
like-minded
journey
souls.
with. Yeah.
Yes, find other like-minded families. They're out there. Matt
Yeah.
was just telling me about his neighbors that are just lovely.
Yeah. You're going to get to meet them tonight. You'll love them. All of them.
Excellent.
They're so beautiful.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Can't wait. I wonder if that was our Ryan Casey. Because Ryan doesn't have kids yet.
This guy has a fetus in the oven.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. He
that
just
might be
got
it.
married to a Sheila. Ariel, I think her name is.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's red-headed.
Okay.
Ryan Casey. Is that your boy?
I'm thinking it from Atlanta.
Yeah, no, that's different, I think.
Oh, is this a different Ryan
Look,
Casey?
I might be wrong.
All
Anyway,
right.
any other questions there, or should we just keep...
Haley Luya
Oh.
asks,
Nice name.
She's wonderful.
yeah, she's one of the moderators. What does Mr. Rummelsburg suggest for parents of disabled children? She says public schools seem to have the most access to services,
Good question.
but if you don't want them to go to public school, then what are some other options or thoughts?
That is a really tough question, and it's one I hear a lot, because what's said is that a charter school or a Catholic school or a private school will not have the services for special needs or disabled children. And I think materially that's true. But I like to ask questions about, well, what is it that these services render, and what is it that the program really is to help kids with special needs? And if the program's disordered for kids that don't have special needs, I wonder how it could be possibly ordered to kids that do. So I think that's a legitimate concern, and a lot of parents I know are really worried about that. So I don't have a great answer for that. I tend to believe that the services, and it really depends on how severely disabled or what kind of needs there are. It really depends on that. If there's some of the lighter things like ADHD and other disabilities that we call in schools, then they're really not worth it at all in the public schools. If they are occupational therapy issues, that's a different question, I think. But so I'm not sure which she's referring to.
Yeah.
But they tend to do to special needs kids, or what we call special ed kids, what they do to regular kids, only more of it, more repetition. And I don't think that's terribly helpful or respectful of the human person. I think that the modern public school is an insult to the dignity of the human person. And I don't know enough about the kinds of services they render in special ed programs, but I don't see why it would be much different.
Well, the public school just offers a one-stop shop, convenient for those services, but the services are still available to every parent that homeschools. You just have to
Reiterate that, because they wouldn't have heard
Okay. My lovely wife, Faith, she tells me that the public schools are a one-stop shop for all services, but if you keep your kid home, you can apply to the state and get those same services. Yeah, and I would still encourage a real, honest evaluation of what those services render. Asking about the ends and the means and the purpose of them.
Yeah.
So it's a really complicated question.
Yeah.
It's very
I
difficult.
love your humility in answering it. Anything else?
I have a question.
Hey.
So, having grown up in Regina Caeli, the kind of objection I hear a lot to homeschooling is that there's no sort of larger social group that you grow up as a part of, and there's no like kind of audience or kind of background group of people to which to kind of contrast yourself to, or have a definition separate from, or you know, if you're creating some work of art, to put that in front of people and see the reaction to it. So that's what I would say is, what would be your response to people who say, you know, how are you going to socialize your children? Because in some ways they're going to have friends and they're going to have, you know, things that they do. That's a good answer. But the other side to it, I'd say, is it is really hard to grow up without a large group of people that are, you know, different from you, and to be plugged into that world. So.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a very complicated question, and really wrapped up in a lot of what people are concerned about today. Often complaints you hear from homeschooling kids is that there aren't enough people, but you have to really ask, what's the value of this large group of people, which we might say each human soul is intrinsically, incalculably valuable, right? So it is a value to know more people, for sure, but I'm not...
Feel free to push back too, Neil.
Push back on this if I offend you. But I tend to think that we're caught up in sort of false virtues of like diversity or experiential learning, where the more experience you have, the better. That's not necessarily true. You know, you can go to a large gathering of people, you can go to a holy mass, which has tons of people, or you can go to a rock concert, and the difference really matters. So you might ask a question: would you rather be around 10 families who are holy, faithful, and good, or 1,000 families who are going to socialize your kids in the ways of the modern world? That may be the question you're facing. And one is infinitely preferable over the other. But there is that question. Why do we want our stuff in front of thousands of eyes is a good question.
Feel free to come back at that.
Why do we want our stuff in front of 1,000 eyes?
Because I feel like you're getting at something, and it's not as surfacey as it might first appear. You're not. I don't think you're just saying, how do kids become social? It's like, well, you're social. You went to Regina Caeli. You're aware that people can be social. So what is it?
I guess what I'd say is, growing up, I saw a sort of world that was Christian and not of the world, but also not really in the world. And so there's kind of things and understandings outside of what I was seeing that I kind of felt very separate from. How do I say this? Let me think. Just kind of very disconnected from the world, and having sort of everyone else outside of this bubble villainized in a sort of way, which I think is
one thing I see sometimes. You can keep talking, but someone I'll see maybe you see something of a defensive posture against the world. There's not a willingness to dialogue because they're the pagan, they're the heretic, they're the enemy.
Right.
So there tends to be even this sort of smugness that can come about when you've read these classical works and now believe yourself to be superior.
That's what I'd say. Is I say that if our faith is a place of security, then it seems to me that we could be sending our kids wherever, and as long as they were well enough educated by us in the first place, then they would have a beacon of truth to carry and to be, if at war with the people around them, at least able to live in the same room with them and not be totally, turned into something else.
Very understandable. No, that's a great point. And the question becomes, when do we know that our children are prepared to encounter society at large? And I think it's a bad idea to read the classics and allow that to puff you up. What we can learn most from the classics is for that not to be the case, but it often is, and you're right. And I think it's a horrible idea to put yourself in a bubble and raise yourself above everybody else. We're all fallen. We're all in the same situation. But I would really encourage you not to see your children as salt and light in the world before they're formed. So we're responsible for protecting the innocence of our children. In general, the large groups and the large schools utterly destroy innocence, utterly. And I don't know if that necessarily makes those groups our enemies, but the form of the modern public school is the enemy of our children because it destroys their souls on purpose. And I don't think that's good for children under any circumstances, but I'd rather have you do it when you're 20 than when you're 10. But there is something to be said for being able to engage the world as it is.
Yeah, the other thing that perhaps needs to be brought up too is that just because I'm part of a Catholic community, it doesn't mean those Catholics are healed, flourishing people. They could be rigid in the negative sense.
That's right.
Puritanical in the negative sense, judgmental of others in the negative sense.
Sure.
And if that is your primary experience of the Christian life and you're in a bubble, I can see how that would also be detrimental.
Yeah, I think that's what Neil's onto, and I think you're right. There's a sense in which there's a kind of damage that comes from the bubble that misinforms and says we're better than them. They're our enemies. St. Paul says our enemies are the powers and principalities. And so the enemy is not the particular people in the school, it's the system, it's the theory that is a rejection of truth. Does that make sense? So I think you're right. As St. Paul would say, we need to recognize who the enemy is, and if that bubble insulates and inculcates pride and viciousness, that's terrible. There's no sense in which that could be helpful. So I think that's a tough question. You're asking a very complicated question that deserves a better answer than that. But I always, it would err in favor of protecting our children's innocence before they go out into the world, and we want them to go into the world, and we want them to be salt and light. We want them to
How do you help your children? I'm experiencing this now with a wonderful 13-year-old boy.
Yeah.
He's terrific.
Yeah.
How do you allow them to start experiencing the world in a way that's helpful? And
That's a really tough question,
Yeah.
especially for 13-year-old. You send them to St. Greg's is probably the best thing you could do.
Yeah.
It's probably the best thing you could do. I mean, other than having a plan at home but I love the idea of sending your young man to St. Greg's, where he will be out in the world.
Where they butcher animals.
And they live like men.
Yeah.
They live like free men. So yeah.
One thing I don't think I realized when I had little children is that they would grow up and mature intellectually and physically as they were encountering the world.
Yeah.
Because I think when I had little children, I thought, how could I ever possibly? And there was this real fear.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it might just be that my son's particularly bright, but we talk about certain things very openly.
Yeah.
Pornography, these sorts of things,
Right.
Transgenderism, ideology, these sorts of things. And he grasps them and is passionate about them. And,
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And that's not right for every 13-year-old in every household.
No, that's right.
Yeah, it depends on a lot. I mean, so if your kids are not generally exposed to those ideologies, I think it's better to hold off and cultivate their souls in the great literature and the wholesome activities in the outdoors.
Yeah.
And then when it's encroaching, then those dialogues.
It needs to be addressed at that point.
It needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
It's like Neil would bring up, it's awfully shocking for a young soul from that bubble to go out into the world, isn't it? It's awfully shocking.
Yeah, there's also different temperaments, isn't there? I mean, there are certain children that I have who are very aware of everything around them.
Yes.
Some are more sort of introspective.
Yeah.
Like, what's his name from Brothers Karamazov, Alyosha. Very sort of silent and thoughtful. Mm-hmm. There are others who are very aware of everything.
Yes.
And so this one particular child I'm referring to was addressing things far before I thought he had any knowledge of. How do you even know of this thing?
Right.
But of course, what do you mean? We live in a society as...
Yeah, and the kids are probably going to know more than you think they know, even
Yeah.
even in a protected bubble.
Yeah.
Tough times.
Yeah. Cool.
All right.
Not seeing too many more questions.
All right. Anything else you'd like to talk about before we wrap up? You have a wonderful course on logic, I believe.
Yeah, I did want to talk about that. I want to make the suggestion that to recover an authentic education really ought to be in the highest consideration of what we call the liberal arts, the trivium and the quadrivium. Very, very important considerations in a real authentic education. And I think those words, speech has been abused so much in this age. I mean, we were talking about 1984 and how they've taken these words and redefined them, or even the Ministry of Truth, who redefines history. It's getting rewritten left and right all the time. So even when it comes to grammar, logic, and rhetoric, these terms are used, but not in the way that an authentic Catholic classical education ought to use them. So in response to a request from the Scully sisters, I made a course on the liberal art of logic, and I made an 8-week course that I'm remaking into a 16-week course for parents to become acquainted with the principles that undergird the liberal art of logic. And it's dealing only with the first act of the mind.
Wow.
And it's accompanied by a book written by Dr. Thaddeus Kozinski. The book itself has a preface from Peter Kraft, and it's I think a really wonderful introduction for 7th, 8th through 12th graders to just begin to get a grasp of what the liberal art of logic really is. And in fact, it's the liberal art of liberal arts. It's the liberal art through which you see and interpret all the others, including grammar, rhetoric, and all the arts, which are the vias, the ways into philosophy and theology. These are the means by which we study them properly. So I would highly encourage parents that want to homeschool or parents that want to work with their children to have a look at this logic course and see if it makes sense for you yourself to become acquainted with logic in the liberal arts sense, and so that you can pass it on to your children. So there will be a link on the page below where you can see testimonies from parents who have taken it before, and you'll get an idea about it. And there's a syllabus there and everything, so you can see that.
Fantastic.
I highly encourage it for parents.
What do you want to do for the rest of the day?
I can't wait to hang out with the Fradds.
What do you want to do?
We're gonna,
Hanging out with the Fradds.
yeah, we're gonna enjoy sauna later,
Cigars.
bourbon,
More cigars.
Yeah.
Holy Mass is at 4.
We're going to Holy Mass at 4. Yes, we'd love to do that. Love to do that.
I'd love to go on a hike with you.
Love to go on a hike.
It's so lovely. You'd love it if you feel up for it. Yeah.
Absolutely. We love the outdoors. We love to get outdoors. So,
Yeah.
But
Not to interrupt, but we
Not to interrupt your private. Hey,
Okay.
super chat.
All right, super chat.
This is from Ryan Casey.
I know
Ryan
Ryan.
says, how do you feel about STEM educations or even STEAM educations?
Ooh.
And this is a thought I was having too, is it seems as though there are some things which are just very hard to get without college, like an engineering kind of knowledge.
Right. Woo. I'm slightly horrified by STEM and STEAM programs in general, which shouldn't be confused with the authentic material sciences. Their engineering is such a vital course of study, vocation, and the material sciences are amazing to the point of miraculous and very, very important, but they are not foundational in authentic education. You could read The Idea of the University by Cardinal St. Newman, and you could see where he says that philosophy is the science of sciences. Theology is the queen of the science. Philosophy is the handmaid of theology, but philosophy must be the lens through which you see and order all the other sciences. So the STEM classes, while vitally important as hand servants of philosophy, need to be seen as such. But there's been this almost exclusive emphasis on STEM and STEAM before we've even delved into literacy. So I think it's hugely problematic. It's a matter of being out of order. So if somebody is literate or geometrized, if they have the quadrivium and the trivium in soul, then they're beautifully prepared to delve into the material sciences. But before that, I don't think they are. And I think things tend to get out of order, and it leads to scientism, which is probably one of the major problems of the age. So I de-emphasize those things, and I encourage anybody to delve into any material science that piques their interest. But in education, first things first. Let's become literate.
Sweet. Cool. Thanks everybody for being here, for watching. If you haven't yet, you could subscribe if you want. What else could they do? You could smash your phone and computer.
Smash your TV.
But if you're not going to do that, you may as well have YouTube pushing
Fradd.
my stuff at you. We got some great guests coming up. Really amazing people. This is such an honor just to sit across from people just to talk to them. What a gift.
Agreed. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thanks
you
for
so
being
much.
here. I really appreciate you making the time out.
My pleasure and joy.
All right.
So good to see you. Thank you.
Go.